Hey guys, Tarke here, and today we're joined by Chris Wilson to talk all about items. Thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. Great to be here.
And before we get into it, just very quickly, again, we're talking mostly just about items. It's going to be more of a discussion-based episode than our usual bombard Chris with 50 questions, so expect less topics but a lot more depth in each one. So let's start with that. Chris, you've often said that good item design is one of the key factors of Path of Exile's success, and it's a reason why many other modern ARPGs have kind of struggled a little bit with their landing. Do you want to go into a little bit more depth on that?
So we came from a background of playing action RPGs before making Path of Exile. Honestly, a lot of Diablo 2, most of the other games we played kind of underscored why the item design was really good in Diablo 2. And so when we were trying to work out the pillars that we wanted to focus on for Path of Exile, we knew that having secure online servers with good items was the key. You needed a situation where you can find good stuff and you can show it off to other people, and there was no way for you to cheat that into existence. So this is like pre-harvest crafting, basically. And so it was critical for us that we got the item stuff right. And that was kind of the baseline. And then since then, we've looked at other action RPGs that have come out, and they usually get the item stuff wrong in some way, or have like really weak character systems for the items to interact with. And so in general, people may blame like poor combat or unstable servers and stuff for bad launches of other games, but it often comes down to the items just not being compelling enough, not having the right pacing, not having the right relative values, not having interesting mods. There's all sorts of ways that people can make mistakes. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you compare our game with the classic action RPGs, we're not too divergent from the types of, the fundamental way that the items are designed is similar to Diablo 1 and 2, Titan Quest, other early classics like that. We haven't diverged too much from the recipe that's worked well for the genre when it started out.
And when you say Diablo 2, are you mostly talking about runes or like original Diablo or the expansion?
There's a lot to learn from classic D2, but many of the ways that they improved things in the expansion were good. Some, of course, we disagree with. We weren't particularly happy with charms as a mechanic in terms of taking up inventory space. Rune words had their problems. Like, you're probably not going to see rune words in Path of Exile, and I tried to push for rune words, but people were correct with their criticisms of those. So, it's mostly classic D2 that we think was just in exactly the right space for this. But a lot of the mods they added in the expansion were decent. It's just that some of them were kind of a waste of time. There was a lot of cast on various trigger stuff on items that I didn't particularly like in the expansion. You'll see that isn't particularly common as a base mod in Path of Exile for that reason.
Are there any like particular mods, since you kind of talk about the mod pool a bit, that's been added to PoE that you kind of look back and regretted or wish they'd been there early on or not been there? Or
I'm pretty happy with the general mod pool on Raiz. Like, it goes through a bit of an approval process where it's hard to get stuff into that pool or out of the pool. We kind of want it to be more diverse. It's a long story, and it's a bit divisive for me to say this, but the harder it is to roll good items, the better the game is, within reason, of course. And so, to keep people chasing good items, we do want a diverse mod pool, but we don't just spam stuff in there for the purpose of making it hard, because then it will be kind of underwhelming and not particularly. There won't be any feel goods when you get good stuff occasionally. So I'm pretty happy with the mod pool in general. I kind of wish we had more diversity early on. Now, of course, these days, with all of the various influence types, that mod pool is practically quite a lot larger, which is very interesting and has kind of ushered in a new era of rare items in Path of Exile.
So, do you think... Oh, go ahead. Do you think it still holds true that, like, do you need this, like, what was it? You just said it. That you need a lot of RNG and a lot of like long-term, because you have crafting with a bench already. So obviously it's not always the case that you need everything to be extremely hard to get to be interesting. So do you think it always holds true?
The crafting bench is useful for plugging one hole in an item, essentially. Like, I'm missing fire resist, and this will be perfect. You can use the crafting bench to get a somewhat inferior version of fire resist on the item, which is great. But we don't want it to be the solution to fixing all your items. Now, of course, with the big harvest experiment, you get a lot of solutions to fixing your items. Like, we've all seen the effect of that, and that's been very, very interesting to watch what people make. And I think I had a quote before we released Harvest that was like, this is the expansion that's going to ruin the game or whatever. And to some extent, it did actually like really shortcut the item acquisition game by quite a lot more than we expected.
So when you say that making a good item needs to be difficult, you Do you mean just like good as in baseline quality item in that slot, or like you want the finished item in that slot to be the difficult thing to acquire? Because like a watered down version or a pulled toned back version of Harvest could easily provide the ability to craft like middle class items, so to speak, while still maintaining chase things.
Everything's relative. Players do not need the best items to complete the hardest content in the game, really, right? Like, you honestly can make do with 70 percentile stuff. It's a question of pride and bragging rights after that point. And so one of the important concepts we have basically is how many steps players take when upgrading their character. If you're playing pure SSF, you make a lot of upgrades. Like, we've had people internally on our team who have switched to SSF and kind of feel it's more rewarding because they get the feeling of finding good stuff and improving their character multiple times per session. Whereas, as you know, a very efficient player in trade does a few key trades and gets most of the power, and then there's nothing they can find on the ground that's actually going to improve their character. And that's, a fun game, right? Trade has to be there. It's how Path of Exile is, and a lot of people enjoy that. But we do want to have a lot of steps to upgrading. So your league experience is 100 stories of finding good items that are compelling. Like, every time you link an item on Reddit or paste the results of it in chat to a friend to say, look at this that I just found, that's a success of Path of Exile gameplay. And we just need more of that. Like, I want it so players are just feeling good about it, item acquisition, and showing them off to other players a lot more often than they currently are.
A quick thing you touched on there about you don't need these perfect items, that's something that I completely agree with. How do you go about balancing items in a game like Path of Exile, where it's not like I'm playing a Cyclone build, Octavian's playing a Cyclone build, and the only difference is the items? How do you balance around the power of the available items with the ascendancies, how good a skill tree might be, if it's 20 points more efficient or less efficient or less levels? Or
it's very hard to balance items because we can't really change them very much. Like, we haven't had patch notes where the 3rd tier life mod now has a wider range. That kind of stuff doesn't happen very often, and it's partly because the items are locked in forever. And it's why we're quite careful. Like, recently we introduced some bugged items due to various crafting exploits in Harvest, and we're fixing those. Some of them we're fixing already, some of them we're fixing in the next week, and some of them we're fixing in the next league, depending on how many are affected, how powerful the items are. Like, we don't want to break people's characters. We want to break stuff that people have traded for, because that's essentially a post hoc trade scam. But we do want it so that the items are all correct and as they were initially intended to be. Like, that's an important part of the economy to us. But generally, the balance of item mods is typically against other item mods or other available things on the item. So it's relatively easy to balance those. You just put something in there that's about right for that slot. The hard part is balancing stuff on the tree, balancing ascendancy classes, balancing skills, because those are things where we can change them afterwards, so we're less careful. We try skills that are powerful out of the bat. We try ascendancies that do crazy stuff. We wouldn't put that crazy stuff on items because you just can't take it out of the game. Like, we've never removed a mod from an item and just said, okay, all those rares are now scrubbed. That's not something we can do. So we're a lot more careful with those.
Are you talking about standard? Because like with Harvest, you definitely influence the overall game a lot. Obviously, we don't know if it's going core or what aspects of it are going to be implemented in the future, but that's changing items a lot, I think. Even though it's not adding mods.
I am talking about standard, and I get it. Not many people play standard, and none of us here necessarily are having long-term standard characters, and I bet like 90% of people and 95% of people in chat aren't.
Oh, I have a lot of standard characters, sorry.
Okay. More in terms of like, sitting there just blindly playing one of them even after leagues come out. Part of the reason here is because standard has to exist and the items have to have value for your league progress to feel meaningful. It has to be that you're playing this league, you're getting stuff for later. Later may never come. You may never go to standard and put all of the exalts in one big pile and be happy that you've got 3,000. They're basically worthless, but you could do that if you wanted to. And there may be a day where standard matters, and that makes it all worthwhile. If we essentially voided the challenge leagues, there'll be a lot less incentive to actually acquire items for later. So there's this kind of illusion that later is important that keeps the game going. And that's not something we ever plan to take away. Standard's going to be there. We're not actually at any point going to scrub away all the old items like that. And so we care that the people in standard who are playing don't accidentally have too much of their work undone by a particular challenge league, making it too easy to find top tier items. And I think that's something that Harvest is a little guilty of. To some extent, giving a lot more mirror-worthy stuff to standard, which is probably going to upset some players there.
I was going to ask if you had any like angry emails you've invalidated the last 8 years of my crafting life from one league 2 weeks in or anything like that.
No, I avoided angry emails about that one.
That makes a nice change.
You mentioned it needs to be hard to craft items. What is the hard part that you feel needs to be there? Like is it it takes like 100 rolls to get like the good tier 1 modifier on this, or the process is involved or requires many different things? What's the part that needs to be hard?
So we're looking to limit the amount of perfect items to very few per league. The idea is that if you have, like, let's say you're a bow character, and we've pitched unique bows correctly so that rares are still ideally what you're looking for, which is basically never true with bows, but hopefully if we get the unique balance right, you're looking for a really good rare bow. It should be that someone gets within that league. It gets posted on social media. People say, that's amazing, I need that bow, you can't get better. But there aren't very many like that. If it's too easy, everyone gets a bow like that, or the top 5% of players. And if it's too hard, no one does. And then what was the point, of pushing really hard in the league? And it doesn't just have to be number of rolls. Ideally, it's more exciting than just spamming chaoses, right? And thankfully, Path of Exile is in a good place with a lot of the advanced crafting stuff, where I personally do not understand the complicated stuff that the players are doing to make some of these items, right? Like, people will explain it to me, and I'll stare blankly at them and say, repeat that slowly. So how are you using delve crafting combined with such and such? It's complicated, and I love that. Like, people are doing such cool stuff. Like, the idea of getting demigods and corrupting them so that they're, like getting them into rare and then 5-for-1ing them so that you get a base type. That kind of cool stuff is why the game is good. It's just this feeling of there are tricks you can do that make interesting items for the experts who know it, and it's worth learning about Path of Exile to find that stuff out. And so, we're constantly surprised by what the community is doing to make crafting easier, because we can set the odds so that the chance of chaosing your way into an item is 1 in a million, and they'll still get the item in 3 weeks using tricks, and that's cool.
I think one of the strengths of PoE's crafting system, and something that, like, going forwards, I'd love to see the game lean into even harder, is that builds have such diversity that can get reflected in the items, and that makes it difficult to craft the perfect item for you. But one of the problems that can occur, and that Harvest has highlighted to some degree, is when there's generically really powerful stuff that's also really easy or even just moderately easy to access. We saw the same thing with previous multi-mod before it was nerfed and limited to a certain number, where nobody bothered trying to craft the really cool jeweled foil or really cool bow they could make, because they could just make a quite good one that could handle everything that looked like everybody else's bow for the same amount. And in Harvest League, you can make a quite good explodey chest that looks like everybody else's explodey chest for very little currency comparatively to making your perfect item. And I think that's a hole in a crafting system like Harvest that makes those like moderate to high powerful items a little too easy to just replicate 1-to-1.
Yeah, you're completely right. And honestly, a lot of the high-end stuff and getting the best things has to come down to bragging rights at the end of the day. And maybe we need better systems for getting people to feel good about their items that they found beyond just posting it on Reddit. Now, the harvest crafting is intentionally overpowered, and there are 2 reasons for that, right? At its core, if we're being honest here, right? Reason number 1 is it helps the league be compelling by providing players with crazy stuff that they couldn't normally do. And Harvest was a league that was being developed during the pandemic lockdown. It's very divisive, right? Like, it's one of those things where, the gardening stuff is exciting for some players, not exciting for others. And we felt that going out with a strong crafting system, and it was the right choice, because a divisive league plus a weak crafting system might be safe, but probably doesn't get very many players. So we felt this is the time to try the strong one, see where it ends up. And then the other thing is data. We're actively talking about how crafting and stuff is going to work in Path of Exile 2. We need to do experiments. We need to get actual data on what happens if there are weak crafts, what happens if there are strong crafts, what happens if players get items too easily. What's retention like if you can make good items? It's not great, right? Like, we've learned some lessons from that. You can see the Steam charts, and while they're not particularly representative of reality, this hasn't been our highest retention league ever, despite the fact that we feel it's quite a high quality one that had a relatively strong launch. And so we're trying to piece together from the data, what's the retention like on the players who heavily engage with crafting compared to those who don't? Was the retention slightly worse than average because the mechanic was complicated and divisive? Maybe. Or maybe it's worse than average because players get the items they need way too quickly and they don't have any goals left for their characters. And so we're getting so much interesting information that will help us both pitch the power of reward systems in the future and also understand where we should be with crafting in Path of Exile 2. Should it be easy? Should it be hard? And this also plays into the very complicated topic of ground drops, right? Like, I'm sure in this podcast, we're going to talk about the power of items you get from the ground, because obviously they're terrible compared to the things that you craft. And so, especially with the big item revamp we're planning internally, which is ideally pre-PoE 2, there's a lot of thinking we have to do about how good the ground should be versus how good the crafting should be.
With how powerful some of the mods are in the mod pool, like at the higher end of gearing, do you not think that might have a hindrance of, say, I want to craft a unique piece for myself, but due to the fact that you restricted the getting to some of the more interesting mods so heavily because some of them are too powerful, that we just end up, at least without too heavy investment with a lot of alteration, exalt slamming, with kind of generic items rather than interacting with PoE's very interesting set of mod pools that are just too hard to access? Because I feel in Harvest that I get to interact with a lot of very hard mods that might not be too powerful, but it makes the game a lot more interesting.
Well, I appreciate that you feel that with Harvest, and we have to be careful because interesting mods can also just be bad mods to people that don't use them. Like if it's cool for your build and lets you do cool stuff, it's probably just bad for the regular character that wants to just kill stuff the boring way. And so it's a balance, right? We need the generic mod pool to be pretty vanilla. You know, it's life and damage and some pretty straightforward stuff. And then we get exciting stuff through crafting and unique items, influence, and so on.
I think
You were talking about who?
Oh no, I'll go then. Screw you. I think me and Nugi come to this because I'm actually very against harvest crafting. I think it's a fun experiment, but I think it makes me feel apathetic towards items. Like a good example, Nugi crafted this insane belt and he sent it to me, and I just kind of went, "Who cares?" Because I've been sent so many cool items this league, they just mean nothing. I think it's one thing which is cool, and this is one idea I've spoken about a little bit, which I think would be kind of interesting. The idea of being able to like target exalts to go towards specific crafts, I think isn't necessarily that big of a deal. For me, the problem with Harvest is the targeted annuls, because that removes any risk from crafting. So if you're in a situation like Nugi where you want a specific mod, maybe you did like some uber fire breach, and then you take an exalt from your stash, it's now a fire exalt, it's now gives you a random fire mod. You can still brick an item that way because it could hit the wrong thing, or you could use it to guarantee the mod you want. I feel like as soon as you can do the super targeted remove, swap this, that, and the other, the items become meaningless. Yesterday I decided to make a lightning trapper, and in the space of half an hour I made 2-3 tier 1, tier 2 items, and it's like I got all my most important mods. I was playing a dagger build, cast exalt guarantees spell crit as the only suffix, so like I got my stuff locked in and it was done, and I never need to replace those, and that's made it really boring. I think being able to target specific interesting mods, like if you're playing like a bleed bow, being able to target the elder mod, which is level 83 only, that stuff's great. But when you remove any risk from crafting, it just becomes a matter of when, and then it's boring. I don't know.
I mean, with enough iteration, everything is always a matter of when. At the end of the day, I will say when you bring up my belt, I think that's a dangerous piece to bring up because there are two specific mods on the suffixes that are not targetable by harvest crafting at all. Secondly, all the life mods are both on prefix and suffix, and some of them are much harder to get. So every time you do a null, you actually do risk. So it's I had to take a 1 in 11 gamble and then a 2 in 9, and they had to hit both for it to actually, win out. While also first having to set that item up with those flash mods in the first place with a T1 roll already, which is like a 1 in many thousands to even hit in the first place. So the harvest craft necessarily doesn't remove the RNG and the chance of like hitting the money shot, but I think some of the meta crafting is more problematic because it allows you, for instance, I made a shield where I hit 3 shaper influence mods. However, I could then do once I hit the suffix with annulling an life on and off, I could then do suffix can be changed, and then I could target annul only on the prefix without interacting with the suffix, which is also a life mod. So now I'm restricting, I already have a life mod on there, and now I'm taking off a life on and off a life mod, but I'm not interacting with the life mod already on the item, which makes the targeting so much more powerful, not due to harvest crafting, but due to the meta mod that interacts with it.
I think something that blurs a lot of discussions about harvest is how wildly differently it will impact different crafting projects. Because of some I don't have insight into the reasons behind, but from my perspective, relatively arbitrary rules about harvest where it just can't interact with strength or can't do things with minions. And because of some limited mod pools on certain items, you can literally guarantee a chess piece with +1 curse, T1 base crit, T1 life, T1 double res. Like literally guarantee that from scratch. But like Nugi said, with his belt, there's 1 in 1,000 chance of getting what you want. So in one instance, harvest looks perfectly fine and balanced, and it looks like just another interesting tool in your toolbox. Whereas in another, it's build a bear the item.
Well, to me, it sounds like Nugi has an interesting build, and the item that you mentioned, Octavian, isn't an interesting
No,
build. You
it's
know,
not particularly interesting, but it is extremely powerful.
And
I
because
enjoy
Actually,
how excited Nugi was about making that build. By the way, like the description there is exactly what we're trying to capture. Right, that's good.
And I'm just saying, because I want to defend some of the harvest stuff, because I do think it allows you to customize in certain cases, to a good degree of what you can make. Obviously, when there's only one mod, like you were talking about with the chest, Octavian.
Well, actually, 2 power
What?
mods, but
Right. But yeah. But when you're talking about like the chess pieces, because the mod pool is so limited and it's so targetable, it becomes problematic.
No, I really like Harvest in the instance.
Yeah.
I think Harvest did an excellent job of improving weapon crafting. I got way more into melee this league, partially because of the slam changes, but honestly more because it actually felt realistic to consistently make weapon upgrades as I was going. And it didn't feel too easy by any degree. It was still, moderately difficult in a lot of cases, but it felt much more approachable to make a weapon for like a physical DPS build. And Harvest did an excellent job there. But I also got like absolutely nothing out of crafting a GG chest for my build. I didn't feel a thing.
So with that in mind, Chris, because you say like the Nugi, like how passionate he is about how he made that belt, that's what you want to capture. How do you try and design systems so that you have more of that crafting while not alienating the people? Because there's a lot of people who've been telling me, you have to tell Chris this has to go core. I'm finally getting into crafting now. How do you make crafting approachable but still complex?
It's tricky because we kind of designed harvest crafting not to go core in its current form, and we're still talking about this. Like, it's going to get changes at the point that it's core, right? Like, we're not ready to say when and how. We don't know, right? Like, there's conversations, but it was not designed that we take that exactly as it is and put it right into the game. And that's partly why we're able to try crazy stuff in there. Maybe people get good items for a league. And so, it's an ongoing conversation about what we're keeping from it, because there's going to be quite a lot, and what we're throwing away or changing, and there's going to be quite a lot of that. And I know I'm not answering this at all in a very clear way. Our goals with crafting systems over the past and next leagues are basically work out which ones work well so we can have a good backbone for Path of Exile 2 crafting. And there's a subtle experiment with Harvest that people are not aware of. And that is what Harvest crafting is the concept of tiered currency items by level. Imagine we introduced mirrors that work on low-level items, and they're quite common, and mirrors that work on medium-level items that are less common, and ones that work on high-level items are obscenely rare, and the same thing with exalts, so that people use their currency as they play through the game. You find an exalt that only works on less than level 20 items, you're going to slam something, right? It's worthless in the end game. And that's essentially what harvest crafting is, because there's level bracketing, where as you're playing through the campaign, you get exalt effects that are way more common, that work on your low-level items for leveling, basically. And so this was a big experiment there, to see what would actually happen with regard to players' ability to craft as they play without feeling like they have to stash everything for later. Because if there weren't level requirements, you'd find something where you get to annul a physical mod and leave it for a level 70 plus item that you're going to be making in the end game. At the moment, you've got to use it when you're level 30.
Would a similar gradient system expanded into the end game be worthwhile for Harvest to sort of rein in the power a bit, where like eye level of seed determines the tier of roll that it can potentially roll on an end game item? So like if you have a seed from an eye level 75 zone, that's never going to slam T1 Fizz, that can slam T3 Fizz at highest or something like that?
Potentially. I wish part of the issue here is I'm not actually familiar enough with exactly how people craft Path of Exile items on the live realm to be able to give you a specific answer for that. Like, my role with this is way more supervisory / philosophical than actually understanding the exact process of which mods people want. Like, there are guys who are the item guys at work who answer that question, do the math, work it out, set the exact levels, and I get consulted, broadly speaking, for what are we doing about the overall design of what we're achieving with the system. So yeah, that's if I vaguely answer your question in a non-answer way, then that's because of lack of expertise on the specifics of exactly which mods people want on the items that are actually relevant to the builds they're playing in the league that I have not played myself on the live servers.
I mean,
in addition to the like level tiering breaking down thing, I think Harvest also explores the concept of crafting being itemized in a tradable way. So that's your currency system where you can view something in the sense of like this is its trade value versus something being like a menu system. So this is not a thing that I can trade. Yeah, you can still like do a crafting service or something like that, but I think that tends to, when something's in a menu and not an item that can be traded directly, it shifts the focus to I'm going to use this rather than I'm going to trade this for the item that I want to get. Harvest seems to explore that as well. And how do you feel about how that plays in the future? Because I feel like Harvest's menu-based system means that people are crafting a lot more because of that, in addition to the level scaling systems. Like, yeah, you're using your low-level stuff because it's only good on low-level stuff, and then that's getting you crafting a lot more at the lower levels. But if it's non-tradable currency, you can't just look at it and say, I'm just going to exchange this for an item.
Yeah, we were trying to be really careful there. Like, okay, so we announced Harvest and people said, that sounds cool, but we need to be able to save the crafts for later. You should let us put them on currency. And so the hoarder crafting station we made, the crafting benches that let you store crafts, of course, aren't tradable except so far as doing a crafting service for someone. And it was critical that we didn't just devolve this into 300 new types of currency that can be traded, because then we didn't want people to sit there on the trade site and just trade for the things that let them do the crafting. We needed them to actually engage with the league in order to do that. And I feel that, I mean, obviously the seeds are tradable. I don't know how well traded they are. I should get some data on that to see whether or not people are actually finding rare seeds that have good outcomes and specifically trading for those, or whether you just get enough seeds as you play. So that's some data I should probably have checked before the podcast. But we wanted people to be trading seeds rather than using crafting services. You know, we wanted it so that you actually have to go and fight the monster, and ideally the harder crafts have compelling fights and so on. I don't know how well we succeeded. Like, this could be a league where the crafting is good enough that if the fights are bad, people still like the league. But we wanted the fights to be an important part of unlocking that craft.
One thing I will say, just to backtrack a little bit, well, as I said earlier, I wouldn't like it to go core, but I don't mind the elements of it going core. The eye-level tiered currency idea, it does also go back to what you said you were trying to promote of people who have the game knowledge being able to craft wacky items. So just as a very quick example, I played Corsica very early on in the league. The Porcupine Bow gives you an eye level 50 bow, and I purposely went for that rather than the Imperial Legacy at eye level 101 because it let me use level 40 seeds to craft it, so I could get easy access to Exalt and stuff early. And there's lots of stuff with people using essences on low level 1s to guarantee plus levels and stuff. So the idea of having that low level currency still has that metagaming, which you're kind of going after, which I think is kind of cool.
Right, and for a long time, we've kind of toyed with the idea of actually introducing lesser, greater, minor versions of chaoses and alks and that kind of stuff. So you have no reason not to just out everything you see in low levels. It helps you learn about the system, but it solves the problem of you wanting to keep your alks and chaoses for endgame, where you can trade them up for actual currency you're going to spend on your final build. And so, yeah, Harvest was a good opportunity to toy with that. We don't know what the verdict is like. There's something confusing about having so many different versions of currency, and Harvest lets us do it in a relatively clear way. Despite it being gated on a menu with an eye-level value, it's something players still understood pretty well and seem to embrace.
Raiz, I'm curious on your input on this. I could be wrong. Isn't there something with the China version of Pee-wee where it purposely gives you certain currency early on to promote players using it? Is that a thing?
They have different
exactly.
Yeah. Have you thought about having something like that to promote people getting into crafting early?
We've avoided the binding system. So the way it works in the Chinese Path of Exile realm is to stop botting, items are bound to your character unless they're found in maps. So basically anything... Okay, so it all hinges on the fact that the labyrinth is hard for bots to get through. So they made it so that you have to have ascended before you can play maps. And you found tradable items in maps. So the basic plan is if you run a bot, you can't find items that have any value to be traded unless you can get through the labyrinth. Now, of course, the answer is a lot of enterprising people will play the labyrinth manually on each bot, but it gives you a lot of time to detect the bot, and it works moderately well. Like, it's a good technique, and I probably shouldn't be going into detail about this stuff because there's people writing it down. But that's basically the idea behind that. And so everything is bound on the way to maps. Whereas in regular Path of Exile, you run a bot, you find Chaos Orbs in the mudflats and happily sell them to other people or whatever garbage that they're doing is. And so we have to attack it with different methods. Now, we've avoided using binding because fundamentally an important part of action RPGs is finding a good item and then being able to trade it to your friends. Even if you choose not to, you could do. And if it's bound, then SSF is being forced on you. And so once you've got bound items, it's easy to give out tutorialized crafting at NPCs, right? Like, you know, here's some Chaos Orbs. Only you can use them. And sure, people can do crafting services and stuff. Though I think the bound items are somewhat infectious in the Chinese version, or at least can only be used on other bound items, but you certainly can't get someone's sword, chaos it, and then give it back to them. I'm pretty sure there's some rules about that do make it so that the abuse case is there. Anyway, to cut a long story short, if we had item binding, then yeah, we probably could do tutorialized currency, but for the time being, no.
But if you had a system where it was like it could only work on very low-level items, would it be as big of a concern that people are printing like level 20 Chaos Orbs?
It's probably not a big concern, but then we don't have that system, unfortunately. We really don't want to clutter the game with too much stuff, or the feeling that your currency is now completely useless once you hit 25 for the average player who's, well, the below average player who's just getting into it.
I was going to say, like, is there much of a practical difference between a account-bound ALC and an ALC that only works until level 25? Like, I wouldn't say an ALC that only works until level 25 is something that has any sort of tradable value.
It might be that there isn't a practical difference. It's just not something we felt a particular need to explore. The accessibility of the crafting system hasn't been high on our list of, you know, tutorialization things that we want to solve. We kind of feel that, honestly, with a lot of these systems, it's well explained by the wiki, by social media, by people's YouTube videos. The game does an okay job. If a user isn't understanding it, there's probably significantly more important elements of the game that they're not understanding. Like, the users who don't use currency are also the users that put the wrong support gems on their items and have never allocated any passive skills and try to press WASD and, you know.
Right.
One thing quickly before because I don't want to spend too long on this point, what did you think of the system in D2 when you do the quest for the blacksmith and then she gives you the special, you put the trash white item and you get the cool rare back? I always thought that was really cool. Have you ever thought, because obviously you're designing a whole new campaign with PoE2, that instead of giving someone an ALC orb, it's like, you've done a quest for me, I will use an ALC or a chaos on your item. And that could be a way to get people in.
Chassis imbuing is my favorite thing in any game ever. Anyway, the problem there is just that it can be traded essentially with trading services, and we're really careful to not hand out the ability to make rares on demand. It was just a safety thing. It's probably fine. It's probably fine. Now, we actually do this because, okay, so this is going to be weird, but the ascendancy, what are they called? The enchants you get for gloves and boots and so on at the end of the labyrinth are technically done using that exact system. There's a currency item. When you click on it in the UI, it fabricates one and lets you use it on one of your items that puts the enchant on. It would take 30 seconds to make that into an actual currency item you can trade because it's set up like that, you know, through the UI. So we fully support the concept of quest reward UI allowing you to use crafting outcomes on items, you know, currency and so on. It's just that we choose not to at the moment. But honestly, there's a lot of leagues coming. We might do something like that in the future.
Well, the thing is too that, just real quick about the items you receive while leveling on the Chinese version, it also really gives the player an idea of, a lot of players coming into PoE will have an idea like how long the leveling process is going to take in terms of acts, at least. So if a certain currency is introduced in Act 1, like an alteration and a transmute, which are the only two currencies, and I think an alchemy, that gives the player an idea of like, hey, I should, whenever I do drop this currency, I could use it. Because I see so many people that drop a transmute orb and they're just like, what do I do with this? You know, do I use it? Do I not use it? Do I keep it forever? Like, is this the most valuable item in the entire game? Like, they really don't have an idea. But if you have that scaling, they start to kind of warm up to crafting really early on, I feel, and you know, they just understand that so much sooner. So I think a system like that would benefit PoE a lot, especially when it comes to one of the more difficult things, which is pricing items and currencies early on.
We kind of also, we like the fact you can find high-end currency as low-level players. Like the story of you're playing and you just randomly find an Exalt and you're like level 40, you know, or you find a mirror, for example. If the game says, oh, you're low level, you find low mirrors, then there's nothing you can get that's interesting. You can find low-level rares that no one cares about. There's no gold. You can find random low-level uniques that, again, possibly no one cares about unless it's tabular. And you can find low currency, right? But at least the way it's set up at the moment, you can randomly luck into a mirror or something like that while playing low-level characters. And we kind of like the idea, fundamentally, of a noob having something valuable. And, it's like a Magic card player opening a booster pack. A 12-year-old has gone to the shop for the first time, opens a booster pack, and gets some insane foil mythic rare. And then he can trade that for the better part of the deck that he needs to play for the next 6 months because he was lucky. There's the dream of finding that. And good action RPGs will fulfill that dream by letting you get really far ahead of other players just by being lucky. And I feel that if we were to stratify it too much, we take away kind of a bunch of that dream there.
You're the devil, Chris. You want people to use their mirrors on level 30 items. I hear you.
Sometimes it's the right choice. Like, if I'm playing SSF, and I have a mirror, and I'm playing dual wielding, right? Why not?
You'll probably get a better weapon later.
If you're a Twitch streamer, you directly make money out of doing that because everyone loves it.
Ziggy knows all about that.
True,
Actually.
Just very briefly
Ziggy
on
was-
that point, I had a really bad conversation with my stream once. I was in a league playing SF. I really needed Exalted Orbs, and I was saying if I got a mirror drop, I'd vendor it because you get stuff back. Like, no, you would never do that, Tarke. How dare you? It'd be worth so much more in trading. It's like, yeah, but I'm not playing trade. I'm playing SSF, and actually, I'd really want the stuff for vendoring it. And there are a lot of people in chat who are mortified by the idea that I would ever possibly do that. But do you? Because you said
Nice.
a bit before that like SSF is in many ways or can be a better experience. How do you feel about the fact that trade's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and because of that, items are becoming more devalued, we're getting the crazy inflation? Me and Ziggy are running a private league, and Exalt is like 45 chaos, and with that, because it's so cheap, we're using these big currencies a lot. But in these massive trade leagues, when Exalt's like 200 plus chaos, people, even high-end experienced players who know how to craft, still don't want to use those big ticket currency items.
I'm okay with people choosing not to use currency to craft if they want to, especially when there's other good options. It's all about what makes sense. Like, I was playing hardcore SSF in Delirium, and I was looking forward to using the Exalt that I found in order to mastercraft some fizz damage onto my axe, right? Like, I really wanted to do that. It was just failing to actually get the map that I needed to find that crafting recipe in for like 5 days before my character died that stopped that plan. I'm still bitter about this. Anyway, so I don't mind if people aren't using currency for crafting if they have other uses for it. If you say this is worth more in trade, go and trade it. It's okay too, right? Like, it's not a big failing of the system, I feel. And I also don't think that people have to be playing SSF to enjoy the game. They can enjoy the trade league because it lets them see content they otherwise couldn't, right? In SSF, I'm never going to be able to kill the Shaper. I'm not good enough. But in a trade league, I can play some, meta build and do the Shaper and enjoy that part of the game if I need to, because I can just kind of trade my way into it. And we kind of don't want to push people to SSF, even though I personally feel it's a superior experience. There's also some subtlety here talking about SSF where, while it's important, like I say it's important that items of Path of Exile have value and can be traded, but I also say SSF is more fun. And the reason why is the items in SSF can be traded. You just have to take them back to the regular league first, which you can voluntarily do at any time. So the mirror you find, or the Exalt, does have value because you can use it to set up characters. They won't be SSF characters, but it is still something you can technically take out of there and trade with another player to gain something from it. Which is a bit of a side rant.
No, that's fair.
It's like a microcosm of the earlier point about standard in leagues.
Yeah.
Brings up a question I kind of wanted to ask you, Chris, is like, do you have any data or insight into which item acquisition methods see the best player engagement and retention? So that's like, I consider it kind of like 3 categories: the drop, like finding an item, identifying it, crafting / creating an item, and then like trading for an item. Which is the best in terms of like player retention, do you feel?
What do you mean by the best in terms of player retention? Like, do you mean which one is more fun and keeps people playing the game, or which the players choose to use, or what?
Or just like, do you have the stats?
So I think
trade
it's
for
more
play-
important the one that's fun and engaging and that keeps them playing Path of Exile more so than which one's most efficient or effective, because each of them has their own pros and cons. Like, finding an item off the ground is like a big exciting moment. Trading for an item is very like clear to see the progression. Creating an item has like a much more stronger attachment to the item. So each of them has their advantages. But which do you see as having like best player engagement, or like is the best, I guess, in terms of keeping players playing the game.
We need dropped items to be in a much better place than they currently are, and there's a long rant there. But finding an item is a powerful thing. Yeah, sure, when you craft it is also a powerful thing, but that's something that few players actually legitimately engage in. And trade, of course, is the best way of gearing up your character. Like, I'll have friends that are bad at the game that start playing Path of Exile and they don't trade because they're just playing like noobs. And they'll be going along and they'll say to me, man, it gets real hard in Act 6. I just can't kill any monsters. I've died 400 times by the second area, it's just too difficult. And I look at their character and say, oh, you see those items in your currency tab? Trade like 2 of them and you'll triple your DPS and be a god. And then they do that and traders fix their character, right? And then they feel great and they go through and play to Act 10 and then do some more trading and then play to maps. And, trade is incredibly powerful at pumping your character up. But it's kind of this hollow, unfulfilling experience, I feel, because it's not actually something that you've luckily got yourself. It's not a card you've opened, as it were. And so I really want in the next few years to improve the experience of finding Path of Exile items, which is a bit of a project.
Do you think that some degree of agency over trying to get a good thing to drop diminishes the feeling that you get? So like in the analogy of the kid opening the box or the pack of cards and getting the crazy good one, do you think it would diminish it if the person was buying a bunch from a specific set that they knew might have this card in it and then they get it? Like how much of a surprise does it have to be, basically? It's the difference between dropping a mirror or farming a particular area of the Atlas to get the base you need.
Generally in Path of Exile, the base drop pool is pretty generic across the game. There's only div cards and some area-specific ways of getting stuff. And I like the fact that those are relatively sparse, right? Yeah, sure, if you want a certain div card, you're farming a certain area. If you want a certain base, you're farming a certain area for certain things. But most of the time, the right answer to get a mirror is play more Path of Exile, and we like that. And that's why when we're making uniques, we will try very hard to put a lot of them into the base drop pool, right? Like we want more Skyforths and just stuff that can drop in literally any area that gives you a chance of feeling happy about finding it. And this is where I show my age because Skyforth might be bad now. I don't even.
It's got some use.
Mana.
That really makes it difficult to solve the problem of item bloat because you're starting from a position of we need to be able to have everything drop everywhere rather than being able to segment things off to certain areas and have people have some more agency over determining what they're trying to chase.
Yeah, I don't know if more agency is the right thing. Like, we've been experimenting with stuff like incubators and some of the incubator-like designs of you being able to choose an affinity towards certain items, and you'll probably see that again in future leagues. I mean, none that are planned at the moment, but it's the kind of thing we'll return to. So I think that some of the incubator designs that we did before choosing the one that was actually used were quite directed in terms of what you could farm, dangerously so we didn't actually use those. But fixing ground items isn't really a matter of letting the player choose more direction over them. It's just making sure that the items are comparably good compared to what you could relatively easily trade for or craft.
I agree with you that like the most exciting thing is finding and identifying a good item. I spent quite a bit of time discussing and thinking about this topic in particular today. Finding and identifying a nearly perfect item is probably one of the most exciting things in Path of Exile, more so than even crafting an item. But I do think there is a scalability kind of thing there. I did a bit of a thought experiment, which is, let's say you're getting a ton of good gear either through crafting or through drops. I feel like if you're getting rained really good drops, like just getting rained on. So we're talking like Diablo 3 end of the spectrum here, like tons of good items are dropping tailored to your character and whatnot. That fades off, that excitement fades off harder than creating those items, because I think then the reins are taken over by I have ownership over this and I have customization over this, ends up kind of like offsetting that, I guess.
There needs to be a middle ground. And it's hard to change to it, right? Like, if I just go and stick my hands in the game and make it how I want it to be for next league, that will break the game in a way that makes people genuinely unhappy because it will be worse. It has to kind of be tapered to over a period of time. I can't gut crafting to make ground drops better, but it is important that you are finding your own good items and that you're also able to make your own good items. And we can't have it so you can craft stuff that can't be found on the ground too easily. We can't have it so the ground drops stuff that can't be crafted, because if the best items come from the ground, no one will engage in crafting at all due to the fact you can't find, the aspirationally good stuff. It's important that there's paths through both of them. And so we've done quite a lot of work on this ground drops thing. Also motivated by performance and server costs and player understandability and various other bits and pieces to try to significantly mitigate the amount of items dropping while actually improving the quality of the ones you find, and while not doing that in a way that's biased to your particular character. Like, we don't say you're a marauder, let's drop you more weapons. That's not a thing. Like, Loot 2.0 is something we're skipping here. Version numbers, as it were. So we've done this quite large experiment, but yeah, haven't deployed it yet. It's got some stuff we have to work out. I'm happy to talk about that in more detail. Like, it's not a secret thing. It's just quite a big topic.
Quickly, just one thing. Since we are very naturally moving on to loot, is there anything like trade-wise that we talk about before people want to get out of the way so we can then just go full into loot, or should we just go full loot?
Yeah. Trade's a dead meme.
There's like 3 people trying to say something.
Nugi's thinking. He's like, do we move on? Do I say my thing? Go on.
Trade. Okay, just quickly on trade. So one of the things that makes trade so powerful, especially for crafting as well, is the fact that you can just buy out all the top tier trading currencies. So I think especially with harvest crafting, people buying out, because I thought when harvest came in with the hoarding stations that you still had to use them yourself. But people just trade them. So you don't actually end up always using them at the high end. You just sell them off all the good stuff. So it just ends up being like selling exalts. So doesn't that hamper the actual use of the item rather than, like, it just turns it into what it was before, just more powerful, rather than actually being the crafting experience that people crave?
Aside from the obvious issues with scamming and stuff to do with the fact that you have to do like out of trade screen trades for using crafting stations, like you have to trust someone. Aside from those issues, we generally feel that having more elements of the league be tradable is a positive thing. Like, look at prophecy, for example. There are people, myself included, who didn't enjoy doing the prophecies. And so when I find a silver coin, I go, sweet, that's like a quarter of a Chaos Orb or whatever it's worth at the time. And then I trade it for a Chaos Orb and improve my character that way. And having it so that seeds are tradable and technically the Hoarder bench outcomes are tradable is generally a positive thing. And I think you'll find next league in particular, tradability is at an all-time high in that league, right? Like, we do want people to be able to trade progress. Like, imagine if temples could be traded for incursion. That's the kind of thing that could have potentially improved it. Where you build an awesome temple and then say, you know what, specialized in building awesome temples, someone else can get the rewards from that. And so while I think trade is actively reducing the fun of people playing the game because they skip their progress too fast, and while I want people to trade less, I want more things to be tradable in this game.
So I like what you're saying like there a lot, and I'll tell you why. Think about, what if Harvest, when you traded one of the big crafts, is that you also traded the fight? Because that's essentially what you're doing with the temple. You're trading away having to fight through it as well. You're not just trading the craft, but you're trading, the whole experience, and you have to get through it to get to the powerful thing at the end. So if you do want to get your big craft, you actually do have to work and know that your character can take it.
I understand. So having it so that you grow the fight, put all the effort into watering it, and then get the chance to trade that to someone who does the fight, who then trades the outcome, is potentially a way of doing it. And we did consider this kind of stuff, but it also had to fit kind of the story of what we were doing, right? With the gardening, and in case you fight the monsters where they are. And if you want to let someone come into your garden and pay you some exalts, and you stand back and let them fight the monsters and then do the crafting, it's possible. We haven't done it. It's just not clean.
Right. Okay. That's all I had on trade.
PoE2, go Chris. Give us the spicy details after your sip.
Oh, so this is a pre-PoE2 item reduction project. So basically, there are too many items that drop on the ground, right? You've seen this when you're doing those crazy maps. And this has a problem. For a start, every item is rendered, and it's rendered with a shadow, so that's 2 draw calls each, and that slows the game down. And then in your client, 30 times a second, the game says to the item, hey, you're doing anything? And the item's like, nah. And that's 30 times a second. And on the server, we do that as well. So that's costing us $500,000 a year of items not doing anything, and so on and so on. They've got to be communicated to this client. Someone's paying the bandwidth of those. There's a lot of stuff, right? It's not great. Having said that, the game is about items, so that makes sense. And so we have to ideally find a way of toning down the amount of junk that drops without actually affecting people's gameplay experience, right? Like, we want it so that you're still finding good stuff on the ground. And this is also a way of ideally improving ground drops. So we came up with an idea. And this is something I've talked about a bit at ExileCon. It's not particularly new. In fact, we worked on this a bunch last year before it was temporarily put on the shelf. And the basic plan is that, what's the best way of describing this? Looking at rare items in particular, for example, let's say that you have 32 rare items drop, right? If you ID 32 rare items now, you're going to find a bunch of garbage. You know, it's unlikely that those 32 rare items are going to improve your character. So what we're doing is we're condensing down the number you find, but we're rolling multiple items and taking the best ones. And there's various axes that best can be. And essentially what we're doing here is that quantity is turning into the ability to roll lucky outcomes on various different axes. So for example, it can roll lucky sockets, it can roll mod tiers, it can roll lucky mod values, it can roll, there's like 8 of these axes. And so when you get quant, it's essentially getting more items behind the scenes. You're seeing twice, 3 times, 4 times, 10 times as many rares, and it's giving you fewer of them. And so the intention is that you are finding, it's like you picked up all the items and ID'd them and kept the good ones, but it requires actually seeing less stuff. So when you find some rare items, they're better than before. And so this project was a lot of work, and it's working, but it hasn't been extrapolated to everything else throughout the game, right? It hasn't actually been like applied to like chest drops and, you know, delve chests and the 1,000 other places that drop items. It's just for monster loot. And my main concern of it, to be completely honest, is the following. You play through the area and you see a lot fewer items, right? And you think, wow, they ruined the item game. There's far fewer items. These had better be good. And then you identify them, and they are 32 times better than what they were before, which is trash. And so you throw them away and be angry, because you're not going to every single area find every single drop improving your character. It's normal to play a map, then a second map, then a third map in the end game, and not actually get an upgrade. But it sucks when the map is giving you 10 times fewer items that they feel bad still. Even though they're a lot better, they're still too bad. And that's okay. It's just that we're trying to psychologically get over this. We want to find a way of using this because it is better drops for the players and it is fewer items to look at and to process in a way where people don't actually say they ruined drops. Because that's how it felt to me when I was playing, is I just ruined drops, even though they are better. It's just I can't tell.
Isn't that a lot of just time that needs to pass, where people need to get conditioned into the new system? Because if you're used to having the whole map with items, that effect will probably linger for like a league or two, that you expect that to happen, but then it just kind of fades and then you get used to the new normal.
I like to condition people into things without them knowing it's happened. Like I blend
right.
Like, no, seriously, I'll say like the drop rate of this needs to change. If we change it abruptly, people are going to notice. And then we change it by 1% repeatedly over a year and no one notices, right? Like we do this all the time in appropriate places if we really don't want to cause havoc with something. And so that's been effective. And we might have to blend into this as well. It's just that if you go all in with the new item drop stuff, it feels like you're getting not very much stuff. And I worry. We could say to the players, trust us, it's good, right? And they're going to say, let us disable Bloom. And we're going to say, no, trust us, it's good. And they're going to be very angry. And that's kind of what's going to happen with item drops. And trust me, I care a lot more about item drops than Bloom, right? We kill the item drops, we kill the game in days, you know?
Isn't there like 2 levels to that where you could make it feel a lot better? So, because my initial concern of that was like, oh, my alteration orbs. I mean, if you rescale everything so there's like a fraction less loot dropping, but then that loot vendors for a lot more, even if you're not necessarily IDing as many good items, if you're then, you know, only picking up, say, 5 items a map, but then from that you're getting back 10 alterations, then there's still that intrinsic value there, and you're getting more alterations, which is like the core foundation of crafting. And it's like, oh, crafting feels good. So isn't that just one thing that you could just rejig?
Yeah, you are right. We are discussing plans about trying to taper stuff in. It's just tricky because currently the system is kind of an all or nothing thing that isn't finished and affects the game in a way which is hard to taper everything. Like you need some kind of universal multiplier thing. It's kind of the core conceit of it is that quantity doesn't work anymore. It instead just rolls more items and gives you the better ones. Quantity converts into luckiness. And that does mean that players can't create situations where they get gigantic showers of items. And I don't know if we're fully convinced it's the right approach. It solves the problems, but I don't know that it feels like maybe it's good to get a pile of items, right? Like a big pile. Maybe that's why action RPGs are fun. Like I just haven't convinced myself and other senior team members that this is actually a better game, even though there's far less stuff to look at and the items are objectively better.
I think there's issues with the itemization system as it stands as well, that like have kind of grown out of the bulk of items. And the biggest one I'd say is that bases are incredibly key to making certain items worthwhile. So in the new system, or proposed new system, if say a foil drops or a one-handed sword drops and it's a spiraled foil and not a jeweled foil, if you're looking for a real good foil, it almost doesn't matter how many times that thing is rerolled. It's not going to be what you want.
Yeah, I agree. If you're looking for like a white item in order to craft, and there's far fewer white items, it's going to be a longer quest. The same is true with like stone hammers for making chisels and stuff. While that's not relevant these days, I understand. We're very careful to not screw up too many of the recipes, as it were. We do like the idea that the quest for white items is actually a little bit longer if you're needing them for crafting. Like, you remember in Diablo 2 how finding really high, like superior, base types that are ethereal with the right number of bits for rune words and stuff was hard and valuable. That's cool. We don't really have that in Path of Exile to the extent that we would like. Like right now, you find one base item and you're good to go forever, providing you're not accidentally getting it corrupted. And so I'd like a better quest for white items. But yeah, the whole base type thing is an interesting topic, because one of the things we're doing in Path of Exile 2 is completely changing what base types there are. Like with armor, for example, there's far, far fewer just completely redundant intermediary ones that aren't needed. And I don't mean to say halving it if we're not actually halving it, but it's something like that, right? Like we're actually putting some effort into saying, now that we've played Path of Exile, what armor pieces do you need? As opposed to, we're kids, we're going to design a game, let's come up with some armor, which is how we did back, 14, 15 years ago.
Just quickly in the Google Doc, so I counted out a bunch of things. This is just reference points for people in chat. So there are 54 different types of base boots that can drop in Path of Exile, and there are 50 different one-handed weapons. And when I was first counting that out, I was like, there are 25 one-handed weapons? That's ridiculous. I then didn't realize I wasn't counting the additional 25 thrusting swords. So yeah, the actual core base bloat seems to be a big part of the issue. And I would also argue, especially as you said yourself, that influence is such a big deal now. It makes that hunt for getting the right base even harder, because it's a situation of going back to if you're playing a bleed bow, the only way you can get the bleed mod is an eye level 83 or higher elder bow. So you need a citadel bow that's eye level 83, and it has to be of that influence. And it only affects a few niche builds, but there are a few builds where it's like, I have to get this exact one bow of this exact eye level of this exact influence. And then when there's 30 different bows that can drop, it's just like, ugh. So
that's not so much fun.
Yeah.
And I mean that positively, right? I think that's a good thing about our item system. I understand it's frustrating to find the best items, but you're trying to make an insane item for a niche build. I don't know. I like
Sometimes you also just end up settling on the one tier lower, and that's okay. Because either the market is too saturated, or it's too limited, so you just have to go one lower because that's all you can afford or find. Which I think is a good thing.
And I agree with that as well, but quickly on the point that I want to get to is, instead of having 50 different one-handed swords or 20 different bows or whatever, I think one of the big issues that I have, at least with the PoE itemization, is there are tiers of weapons with the same implicits. There are 14 swords with the same 40% accuracy implicit. I wouldn't mind settling for the second or third best bow if there's some kind of trade-off that's got different implicits. So it's like, what if I went for the Citadel, it's got more damage. The Maraketh has less damage, but it's got the movement speed. Maybe there's a different bow which has additional arrows or something meaningful. Just having the however many different Chris daggers there are, which are all just the same thing with different less base items. There can still be, this is the best one, but it's got a different implicit. With the two-hand stuff, you tried to make the new implicits much more interesting, and I think that's a really good way to go. Have you considered just cutting back the amount of basics significantly and then adding more implicits so that it's still fun in that sense?
Yeah, the Path of Exile 2 items do have interesting implicits, but again, that's a little while away, right? We're not switching to the Path of Exile 2 base type system until we are ready to release that content, because you find them in the Path of Exile 2 content and they match it. When you're in Act 2, which looks like Act 2 looks, you're going to find items that are appropriate for it, for example.
Any specific examples?
We'll see. It's getting closer to us showing you.
Yeah, that's so with the base stuff, and with this whole idea of the amount of loot that's dropping and maybe more loot or less loot, how do you feel about the actual way that people pick up their loot? So we're talking about the pickup ranges, not having loot pets that some other games have. I mean, even the China version has. How do you feel about that level of the actual way you pick up the items?
There are cases in game development where you have to say things to the community about how things work, where they will all say you're wrong, but you know you're right. And in Path of Exile, the items are important. In Path of Exile, they're the reason why we play. We want to find items in this game. And this means we have to take items seriously. And part of taking items seriously is that they have weight and character to them. And it's critically important to us that items actually feel meaningful and real. And that's why there's inventory Tetris. And that's why you've got to click them individually. And we get that it's nice if they sort themselves. And we get that it's nice if they pick themselves up and you tag a currency and it scoops up all the other ones. It's less clicking. It's nice, right? Like, I like it when my stuff just goes into a spreadsheet and I don't have to do any work to get it in there, but it becomes less meaningful. And so there's a slippery slope here where, like, sure, having it be slightly easier to pick stuff up is one step down the slippery slope. It probably doesn't ruin the game, right? The game is possibly better if we make one of these changes, but it's a slippery slope where then people will expect the next change and the next change. And eventually you'll play a map and there'll be a spreadsheet at the end saying these are the items that were added to your stash automatically. And it's just EVE Online at that point. And, you know, it's very important to us that we maintain the weight of the items, right? We want items to be real and cumbersome and annoying and valuable and special. And that's going to mean not making those convenience changes with regard to picking up items. And it's just something that everyone is going to disagree with us on that, but it's the right choice for us to make. And yeah, we're just going to unfortunately stick to that.
I think the weight from an item comes more from its use and engagement with the item in terms of like crafting it or doing things to it or things like that, rather than the actual picking up of it. I'm strongly of the opinion that anything that reduces issues with RSI is a positive mood for the game and action RPGs in general, personally. I understand the argument, but I feel like it's an old argument that I don't really know if it's accurate or if the weight comes from other areas in the game.
Maybe we're traditional, right? And it's just a core belief that we hold strongly in our heart, right? Like, you know, while I'm in charge, that's kind of the way it's going to be, and I'll stick to that. And hopefully the people that respect it, and hopefully the others still enjoy the game, and kind of everyone else senior at work agrees with me. Many people don't, and I think they're wrong. And, you know, that's just unfortunately what happens when someone has to make decisions and they kind of believe that it will damage the game too much for the decisions to be made in another way.
Is there a halfway point, do you think? Like a concession between certain things that don't need quite so much weight, but are the vast majority of the clicking? So things like splinters and stuff like that. You've already done some of that. You've already made some concessions in terms of some of this stuff is stacking now, which is...
You are right that if we're dropping homogeneously similar items, we do stack them as a convenience thing, but we don't stack to too few stacks, right? Like, you're still finding 2 or 3 or 4 stacks of seeds rather than 12. You know, but you're not finding one, if you see what I mean. Like, there isn't a thing where you click one seed and get them all sucked up. We don't want to hurt people's hands, but at the same time, we do need it, so there's a minimum amount of action associated with that thing.
My poor hands.
Just to iterate real quick on what Ziggy said, don't you think, like, I fully agree that items need to be tangible. However, right now many feel that there are a lot of currencies, especially, that are just outdated. Like, for instance, wisdom scrolls. Like, do we really need to click every single wisdom scroll and for them to be actually tangible? Same for portals. Is that something that you may be looking for?
Like, you can filter them out and then just trade other minor currency you don't need for them, like 4 to 1 when you need them, right? Like a couple of whetstones, right?
But they actually have a specific use too. Don't you feel like maybe there's a point that we can just skip that? Like, for instance, IDing item. Does that make it more tangible?
We do, like, as you know, we've like, so for example, in Diablo 3, I believe, and I haven't played this game for a very long time, you just right click on something and it will ID it and you don't need to scroll. And then in Diablo 4, from what I can see, it just drops IDs because cool. And it's possible for us to go down the slippery slope, but we feel that finding a wisdom scroll or trading for one from a vendor and then IDing the item is an important part of that process. And it's kind of just the traditional, you know, maybe we're outdated, and maybe we can find a convenient way of identifying your items, but it will probably still use scrolls, to be honest. Like, maybe it prevents you having to click on each one individually if there's someone in your hideout who can do it. But yeah, we're kind of opposed to those kind of improvements. We don't see it as QOL. We see it as like undermining the core systems of the game, masquerading as QOL suggestions, you know?
One question on
see
that
a
quickly.
system-
Sorry, Niggy. The actual portal scrolls, though, because I do think there is some point to where you want the currencies to have weight, and if there were currencies to scrap, there's lots of weird little fragments and splinters I'd be on the chopping block first. But do you intrinsically think that portal scrolls actually add value to the game?
Well, you'll notice that the button that we added that lets you portal to a team member without using a portal scroll kind of undermines that, right? Like, there is evidence there. I don't know. I mean, I don't think a conversation like that is going to result in portals being removed. Like, it's kind of important for the weight of travel, if you know what I mean, for like there being a cost to non-waypoint travel, at least for new players. And a lot of these systems, like ID scrolls and quality to some extent, are mostly there for new players. You care about them when you're playing through, and then they're trivialized. And that's not necessarily a negative thing. There's a concept in game design called mastery systems, which is basically that you quickly learn how to deal with portal scrolls and ID scrolls, and now it's not an issue anymore. And the same thing for quality. Like, you're going to have maxed quality on your items after that point. To some extent, the 6-socket game has previously been a much more difficult game where people work an entire league to get 6 linked sockets. And nowadays it's a bit of a mastery thing where you kind of understand where you're getting it from. Like, there'll be some appropriate harvest craft, or you just bench it, or you just trade for the fusing, so you know roughly that it's going to take you 1437 on average, or whatever the number is that I don't think we ever said before. And it's a solvable thing. And so we're kind of careful because Path of Exile 2's skill system, for example, doesn't care about 6 sockets in the same way because the sockets are in the gems. We've actually been intentionally pushing that to be more of a mastery system where players have more control over it. Like, each league, we're making it easier to 6-link your stuff because it feels like progress. It feels like you're getting more and better items in a given league, knowing that that system is heading for the chopping block in X number of leagues.
Go on, Niggy. Sorry, I will not interrupt you again.
Right, on the so I have 2 things. So on the first one with the wisdoms, so picking up the wisdom and actually using it is a very fun experience. I will grant you that. But don't you think there's a point to where you've kind of worn that out, and when you're just mapping and you are picking up so many items that it might not really be the experience you're looking for is no longer the picking up 30 wisdoms to ID your 30 items in the map, because you're already at that point. There's so much bloat in terms of things you're engaging with that the act of picking up the wisdom is just completely unnecessary. Where it might, from like Act 1 to 10, it might make a lot of sense, but at some point you might want to give the players a little break because they're interacting with so many systems.
Well, to some extent, reducing the number of items that drop will help this, right? Like, if you're identifying 5 to 10 times less rares. But look, I take your points, right? Like, the wisdom scroll and portal scroll thing isn't a hill that I'm going to die on. It's something that could change. It's just, I'm saying, like, the first couple of steps down the slippery slope feel like you can easily climb back up to the top. And maybe it's the right thing for the game. It could well be, right? I don't want people to hurt their hands. I care about the health of the gamers. And so I will talk to the team about it. But it might be a moot point in the ID scroll case if we are reducing the amount of trash that drops.
I think with the ID scroll...
I was just going to say, I missed the start of this conversation. I apologize. But was the original suggestion kind of like stopping picking stuff up, or was it just making stuff
the way it
easy to pick up?
started is I said, how do we feel about vacuum looting and loot pets? And that's where the whole like weight of... I want to talk about pickup radius at some point, which is something we haven't touched on yet. I don't know if that's something you want to
Yeah, because that's what I was going to suggest. It could be less about like, because I very respect the weight of items argument. I do think it is very important. I am curious about how much of it is based on the actual picking up of the item, but I do think like when like a crazy unique drops or something that's really cool drops, like an Exalt drops, the act of picking that up is very satisfying and important. But maybe, yeah, just being able to like your character being able to pick it up a little bit easier, or making that sort of stuff easier to click, or like lower tier stuff being like you can press Q and it loots the lower tier stuff around you or something like that. Maybe is like a comfortable, doesn't feel like you're about to slip on the moss and fall down a mountain kind of vibe.
We'll discuss it. And the loot pets thing, I mean, for a start, those loot pets on the Chinese realm cost money, right? Like that's the pay for advantage there. I mean, I won't say pay to win because I don't know how much you're really winning by having a big pile of ID scrolls, but it's pay for advantage. And that's the line on the Chinese server is in a slightly different place than where it is on our server. I don't feel it's undermining the game particularly badly. Like I like, the Chinese version a lot myself, but the line is in a slightly different place. And so when people ask for loot pets on our server, I assume they mean for free, just as a feature where it just picks up the items for you. And unfortunately, that's, kind of too easy, as we just discussed, reducing the weight of the I'd rather just have IDing be a free mechanic than have to watch a pet run around and pick up those scrolls. And I'm definitely not selling that pet on our server.
But do you not? So playing PoE for many, I honestly think with picking up things in general, it feels like you have a back, like your character has a back injury. Like it literally cannot bend over. It's like you stretch out your hand, but you have to go straight down because that's all you can reach.
Yeah, maybe
just let us bend over just a little bit, maybe.
Ledges are
Just a
the
little
main
bit.
culprit. It's the I'm trying to pick up this thing. Why can't you turn the loot on and off? Oh, I've got to run around for 10 minutes to get to the side of the ledge. I think just having like a slightly extended pickup range, then added in with the less loot dropping, having to ID less items. I think just buffing pickup radius would solve a lot of problems, and it would also have the nice result that you would have less issues of my mirror is stuck in the wall, Chris. Why do you hate me? If we had like that slightly bigger pickup range.
Slightly complicated because the way that picking up works is like, let's say I click on a monster, right? It's going to run to the monster and do an attack. And the same thing happens with a pickup. You click on an item, it's going to run there and do an interaction. And so, sure, I'm not saying it's impossible to change the code to make it do it from a distance, right? Clearly it'll be possible. It's just that that's screwing with the deepest, most complicated part of the interaction code in the most important system. It's got to be done very carefully.
Could you just give pickup range weapon radius and just super jank it that way? Just like you kill Katava plus 20 pickup weapon radius to pick up or something? Surely it's the same system if that's how it works.
I'll review it, right? Like it's worth discussing, but we're generally pretty happy with how it feels to play ourselves, Like we do play, right? Like Mark Neon, that is, will put in, his 7 hours in an evening, and he felt something felt wrong, he would fix it the next day at work, possibly without asking me, and it would make the game better. And so to some extent, a lot of this is to do with our vision of how Path of Exile should be. And of course, we want to hear the feedback. And if enough people have a strong opinion about something, we'll try to work up solutions. They may not be the solutions people suggest, but we will try to make the problem less of a problem.
GGG has a really good track record at essentially giving the players the power to choose how they want to play the game. So this would have been a really good lead up, by the way, Tarke, because I wanted to ask about reducing dropping stuff.
I was going to go into
Octavian,
that just as you started doing it. Good segue.
It would have been a good thing, but
so on that point, Chris, it seems like a lot of this issue is coming from the amount of items that are dropping, and this is the problem seems to be from the amount of leagues that we've got going to the core game itself. So if you're going to be looking at
not even the question,
go on, Raiz.
It's way better. Basically, Chris, considering that you feel a certain way and the players feel a certain way, why not, instead of continuing what Path of Exile does, which is giving players the option of dropping 10 more items right now, because that's pretty much all we can do. We can juice a map and we drop 10 more items instead of one item, for instance. Why not give players the possibility of dropping one item, but possibly 10 times more powerful? And that way they can pick up less stuff. And obviously you have to take into account that then you're only getting a fraction of the alterations, a fraction of the alchemies, all this sort of stuff. Like some form of currency, possibly?
I spoke earlier about the system we have 75% implemented, which turns quant into exactly that, where it basically rolls many items and picks the best one in various different axes. And we're keen to do it. Like, we will do it. We're just trying to make sure that it's actually working and finished and not exploitable, and passes a lot of sanity checks. And that's a tricky one. Like, our current estimate is it's going to take 3 months to finish by the time that we're starting on it, because it's on hold at the moment because we're trying to get the next league done. But it's going to take 3 months. And then I insist that it sits on our testing server internally for 3 months, like a whole league cycle, where the QA team can play with it and we can get feedback and we can, get Ziggy over once the borders are open again, because he's our internal tester of choice, and get feedback on how this actually feels. Throw it on alpha for a while and make sure it's cool, and then it goes on the live realm. So I think that's a minimum of 6 months away. But yeah, it does kind of exactly what you're saying there, where it reduces the amount of items in exchange for better ones. It's just this problems to solve. My main concern with it was, you give me better items, I go, they're still bad, because obviously items need to be 1,000 times better than normal to be all amazing. And when you make it 20 or 30 times better than normal, they're still on average not a direct upgrade to your good endgame character.
Just so I clarify, because chat seems confused, I'm not talking about an item that is the equivalent of 10 Chaos Orbs. I'm not talking about dropping a single item that then rolls 10 times. I'm talking about an item that is possibly 10 times stronger. So it's not a matter of like dropping 10 Chaos Orbs and just spam clicking, something like that. And also giving the players the option to do that rather than forcing a system like that on the player.
Like some sort of currency introduced through a league mechanic that you could throw onto a map and it would add an implicit, I don't know, 80% reduced loot, but 5,000% increased luck or whatever.
For instance, or even tier increases, something like that. But again, not in a form of like re-rolling the item the way we do through a crafting system.
Wouldn't that exclusively lock powerful items behind being dropped then? If like it's not the way, if you can't acquire them the way that you're talking about, like if it can't be acquired through chaos spam or other crafting mechanisms and it has to be through this lucky drop system, that would mean you'd only be able to get it from drops, which would then invalidate crafting to some degree.
No. Like I don't want to argue about it, but it's like
I just want to know I don't want to know what you're thinking. Sorry.
No, yeah. Like as if the item were to be re-rolled 10 times, it would be at 50% of its total power. But with this system, it wouldn't be re-rolled 10 times. It would instead drop 10 times less frequently, but it would be at an average of 75% of the total power of the item. Not an item that like exceeds the power, because I want to avoid that at all costs. It's the biggest problem that I had with fossils. All right, it's fine. We can move on.
Do you?
I guess I gotta explain it.
Would the system extend to? I don't know if you want to address Raiz's point though, or what's it?
Oh,
okay,
no. Address Ian's question. Our system doesn't produce items that can't be found through crafting and stuff. All it does is it basically rolls multiple copies of ground items and picks the better ones.
Yeah, I was saying I was trying to get at whether Raiz was implying that the system should do that.
My interpretation of his question was suggesting we do the lucky drop system as a thing you can add to your map so that the additional items you gain as a reward are fewer but better, rather than, essentially what I want to be game-wide, he's suggesting having as a bonus for additional drops for a map, I think.
Yes, but also applying it to other things like currency and whatnot. Exactly.
Yeah, I'd rather try to get it game-wide. And it doesn't have much of an effect during the campaign, right? Like it tapers, like it goes from 0% up. But yeah, there's quite a lot of items being dropped in Path of Exile, and there's quite a lot of items being rendered. It'll help performance quite a lot in order for us to address that one.
Raiz actually just mentioned something I wanted to ask, which is, would it extend to currency? Like, would a scarab be upgraded? Base currency items? Would anything else be affected?
It's
in terms of
currently
being upgraded.
Mods. What we call equipment, which is things that have mods components internally, so they can get rolled. Stuff that currency works on. So our retention is basically currency isn't modified. You're still finding the same amount of stuff as before. But honestly, the vast majority of what drops is not currency in Path of Exile. It's white item crap.
Backtracking to my very rude interjection earlier. Isn't part of the problem when it comes to the amount of stuff we're picking up the fact that just so much is being added into the core game? Like, once the items feels a lot better, we're still picking up, getting on, I don't know, hundreds at this point of different currencies, different fragments, different sextant types. We've got all these different systems. How do you feel about that current state? Do you think we've gone too far? Are we getting close? Does it want to go backwards? Or how do you feel about the amount of just... Yeah.
We're not opposed to removing leagues. It's just that when we do, people will be unhappy because they liked that league, so we just got to be careful with that. Our intention with Path of Exile 2 is to reduce the set of leagues down to be a much more condensed group, and then to keep the other ones available for specific purposes and so on. We don't have a specific set yet. Like, I think, Beyond is getting retired, for example. I'm pretty sure there's probably no Beyond in Path of Exile 2. There's various bits and pieces like that.
Oh,
Gonna be
What?
like no meme? Like, actually, are we?
This is just a a decision that's 18 months old that will get reevaluated.
Yeah.
Right. But there's other things, like we come up with crazy ideas. We've had discussions where there's an area in Path of Exile 2 where Beyond applies, and only in that area. There's options here. Chat is freaking out about Beyond going away. Oh, that's sad. But the point, this is exactly what happens, right? There are too many leagues. Let's cut 8 of them. Okay, here's one. No, don't cut that. Right?
Why Beyond?
I mean, okay. Like,
Last for such a long time.
But
Beyond
also,
specifically,
to be
totally
fair,
get the
though,
point, but
to be fair,
been like 10
just
years of
before
Beyond.
we all kill Chris, just because you remove Beyond doesn't mean that you can't have a Beyond like system being reintroduced because your idea with
Right.
the League cycle was it's like we take some out, we update some, we put some back in, right?
Yeah. And honestly, the reason why Beyond needs to go is because have you seen the Beyond monsters? They're red bandits, right? Like it's literally we grabbed some bandits from Act 2 and made them red, right? Like at the very least. Here's a random fact. We initially were planning to redo Beyond, so we started work on some actual demons, right? And those are delirium demons, right? We reused them, see? Interesting. Other factoids. The bosses of the tier 4 seeds are shape-shifting forms from Path of Exile 2.
I was really disappointed about
this
that
instead?
because
Careful.
I knew about that from Bex, but the thing which was annoying about that is I was really looking forward to big carnivorous plants, but instead we got animals. And because we've had a harvesting, when are we getting big scary plant monsters, Chris? Big scary.
Like Little Shop of Horrors kind of thing.
Yeah. Lots of teeth.
There's a lot of leagues to come. We'll work it out.
Okay.
I think the way that most players see the Beyond monsters is as orbs of currency, and not necessarily as particular character models.
Have you
Yeah.
considered on adding more meaningful items to do more of the temple stuff and some of the special nodes in Delve?
We want to improve those systems, especially as they're sticking around, right? Like,
Yes.
I have a goal to allocate some time at some point to actually making sure that the old League content is kept up to date. And we do that occasionally. Like, I'm sure we've added rooms to Incursion and so on over time. It's just tricky because, like, our last cycle, okay, so the cycle before last was rushed because of Christmas. And we know there's the curse of the March releases, right? We needed to make sure that Delirium was good, and it was, and people were happy. At least I was happy. With Delirium, solid launch. Compared to previous, bear in mind, Synthesis and Beastry were the two before that, right? We needed to break that curse. So the Christmas League, no time to do any housekeeping. Then Harvest. During lockdown, we can't talk to each other. The normal thing about crowding around a computer involves people just being asleep during the day, right? Like it's, lockdown was hard for development. Harvest took a week longer than normal. It was bad internally for getting that stuff done. And the next league, almost said its name, has a week less because we're trying to catch up so that we don't disturb our schedule before Christmas because that's going to get very bad. And so while the next league is certainly bigger than Harvest, I'm coming way too close to saying that league's name. I need to be very careful here.
Sorry,
I
you
haven't
cut
said
out.
it.
Do you mind just repeating that sentence again very quickly without thinking?
Anyway, we started the next league earlier than we normally would do, so it was coming along really well. Like the thing is far more advanced. Do you remember Ziggy when you came to New Zealand and Incursion was quite playable a lot earlier than it would be? And we were saying to you, look, we've got our schedule's underway. We've done that again. The next league is good and playable early, and it's going to be great. So the problem is, though, with a 12-week development cycle, we really need to focus on just getting that out and solid, which is looking good. But again, no housekeeping. And then the one after the Christmas one, which has to be big because Christmas leagues often affects the end game and stuff, right? So,
But
maybe
that was not my question. My question is if you've considered adding more of the like specialized mods into the game. You have them in Temple and Delve, like as a more of an item tool. That is like if I'm farming the specific map boss, I can get the specific mod more often.
That gets back to what we were talking about earlier, though, where like that's a way of narrowing the pool and reducing the number of items, but it comes at the cost of not having that feeling of being able to drop whatever wherever, Like you have.
I don't think you're narrowing. It just gives more options. You still have all the older systems at the same time, while also having that.
Yeah, but then you run into the problem, and we're getting sidetracked, but then you have the problem where like the best source of the temple mod is no longer temple. Unless it's a situation where the temple mod then drops the special temple currency.
I don't think
you're
Nugi's saying like put temple things elsewhere. I think Nugi's saying more things akin to temple, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, every league does that, doesn't it?
No? Where's the harvest specific mod that only drops from harvest stuff?
Fractured stuff. It's totally from harvest.
We actually do try to reduce the amount of league-specific stuff we do. Okay, so when we're doing a league, we want to be careful about how much power creep we're introducing in terms of the top end of items, right? So for example, Fracture stuff and Synthesis introduced the concept of base types that were just better than previous ones. And so like double corruption was introduced with incursion. It makes items that are better than previous ones. And each time we do that, it invalidates people's standard stuff, which we try to avoid, and it kind of creeps the power up quite a lot because people don't like it when we make the game harder to compensate. So we try to reduce that. And Harvest is a great opportunity where it's easier to get the items. Certainly, it's dangerously easy to get the items, but the top end isn't necessarily pushed. The best possible item in the game is not necessarily significantly better than before. I could be wrong. There could be some crafting stuff in there that snuck by me that's terrible in terms of scariness, but the intention was it's just easier access to items as opposed to better theoretical items.
Yeah, I'd say it achieved that. It basically just reintroduced at the uber top end what synthesis had introduced, because you can technically make synthesis implicit items. But that isn't really new, just an old demon brought back to life.
To backtrack just a tiny bit, since we sort of touched it but didn't really, since obviously you want to have the system where leagues are rotating in and out, just as a base kind of point, are you roughly happy with the amount of splinters and fragments are in the game now? Do you think this is a good place to be at, or is it a bit too far or not far enough? Do you think there's a bit more room there?
I don't know of any particular plans to introduce more, but it probably will happen. Splinters and fragments, it's interesting because when we do pure RNG-based systems, like access to the top bestiary bosses, there was such a backlash, right? We say, there are these bosses, have fun finding them, they're quite rare. And then people freak out about how rare they are and how they played for X hours and didn't find it. So if we put splinters and fragments in play so that you make consistent progress and understand how far along you are and it's tradable, that helps solve that problem, at least from our point of view. And then it's a lot of stuff to click and pick up and manage. So we see it as a positive thing. It's kind of a cheap cop-out, like deterministic grinding. I prefer pure randomness, but then, the RNG in my blood kind of thing. So the team are careful before they introduce new splinters and fragments, but you will see more in the future. And again, we can't remove old ones without taking away entire leagues. Like if we take away breach stuff, people will be unhappy because they use that stuff.
Isn't the middle ground with that more so a system? Because I do like the fact that you can see your progress. It's very fun, especially since I primarily play in like SSF and private leagues. I don't have easy access to everything. It's nice seeing that progress, but isn't then the middle ground that, like, for example, during Delirium League, we have 300 splinters, we get them very often. Whereas now, do we need the 300? Like once it goes core, you then tune it down a bit. So you're still getting that slow progression, but there's not as much clicking, because then you get in a situation where you have someone like Raiz, who's like, I'm just doing many maps an hour. I'll just never pick up any splinters, and I'm just never engaging in any content. And I'm sure Raiz would rather engage with that content, but not have to click 50 times a breach.
You don't click Conqueror splinters. Like, isn't that the real middle ground? It's progression that you can see towards a boss that you're getting to, but there's no Conqueror fragments and there's no Conqueror splinters. You just have a bar that you're filling up by doing a thing you want to do anyway, which is mapping.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if we should have itemized that. That's a great question.
No, don't make it. No.
Oh, God.
We've had league ideas that involves getting mods on characters. Like you find like a character avatar with mods on it and you trade them. Anyway, long story.
But Harvest also had that with, like, once you get the Heart of the Grave, you then have to run your 100 maps, and you've got that bar that fills up. So
I'm not the person who decides the splinter and fragment numbers. I don't know how hard it is to find 300 Smalacrum. Honestly, I haven't played enough of the endgame. I died in yellow maps in that league, and then got pissed off and went to do some work on the next league. I went to load on my spreadsheet of harvest balance values rather than playing more Delirium. And so, yeah, there are people who are very good at this who balance those values. And I'm sure they've considered reducing the number. And it's a pain because you have to round it down, right? Like if you're reducing it by a factor of 3, then you have to scale everyone's things down. And then you have to round it up for the people who have like, a non-multiple of 3. And then there's items hiding in places in the database you don't expect, and those ones don't get affected, and so they're essentially tripled, and it's just a logistical nightmare. And then you got to apply the same thing to Xbox and PlayStation and China and Taiwan. And then later on, you want to pull some items out of a backup, but you accidentally pull them out of the backup when they were triple the values of the current day. And, it's a pain to do things.
Sounds like game dev.
Developing a game sounds hard.
A lot of detail. Like every time we screw up with a recipe with crafting and harvest, the amount of work that has to go into fixing it behind the scenes, like the amount of time to get those items fixed, and people put them in imprints They take their valuable crafted items and they hide them inside other items. You know, it's a nightmare. I should not have emphasized that at all, but it's a complete nightmare.
Why did you get pissed off when you died in Delirium?
Because I was on my way to the Delirium portal and I died to some stupid monsters next to it. I wanted to die to the content,
Damn it.
right? Die for using my flasks.
I was gonna make an on-death argument, but you dodged expertly.
Inside the mist, it was so noob. Like normally when I die, I get to rant the next day at work about how much of an idiot I am, or how we need to change the signaling, or how puncture is stupid, or whatever, right? But here it's like, oh, I was dying, crap, you know?
One of those is a lot more specific than the others.
Since we seem to be moving away from the fragment stuff, and I did want to get onto stash management, is there anything anyone wants to say still on the whole like stuff actually dropping stuff, before we go into the inventory management side of things? Okay, well, in that sense, so obviously there was this whole hoo-ha recently, to put it lightly, of the whole stash situation, and we were seeing that we're now getting the stash alignment thing hopefully coming at some point. Where do you feel like the sweet spot is when it comes to, okay, you've picked up the items, you've spent the time, you've finished your map, between the amount of downtime between maps, the micromanagement setting up the next map, because you want some downtime, you don't want it to be constant. Where do you think that point is? How far would you say we are from that?
The compromise that we're willing to do is that you take your inventory of stuff out of the map and you control click it into your stash. And if you're wanting it to auto sort, the trivial items that have specific tabs will receive those, like essences and, you know, delve stuff and so on. And if it's like a rare that actually requires you to think, where is this going? Why did I pick up this rare? Did I pick it up because I want to vendor it? Did I pick it up because I want to idea to maybe get good values? Did I pick it up for the chaos recipe? Those require you to actually put it somewhere that you want to store it. And so we will be making it so you can control click the simple items into their appropriate stashes. Now, this raises questions, right? Question one. And it probably shouldn't be me raising these questions, but we're going to do it because we do think about this stuff. Question one, is it pay to win if you can easily sort those items trivially into stashes? Now, at the moment, with an empty regular stash, you can control click it all into there and get back to mapping. So it doesn't give you a time advantage in terms of the speed at stashing stuff. Now, of course, it makes a total mess in your tab versus the person who paid money who gets a pristine tab. But we're already selling pay to be organized, right? We're selling pay to have a pretty, you know, layout of items in your stash. So that's one concession. And I agree, there's a line somewhere, and this I don't think is over the line, but it is a fact the Path of Exile has a degree of pay for convenience in terms of long-term storage. We would never sell direct inventory space, of course, because that gives you an advantage on the field. So the second question is, should a person be able to control click into normal stash tabs? Like, should you be able to select one of your regular stash tabs and choose, I want essences to go in here, like it was an essence tab? There's an argument for that. It's a real pain implementation-wise, and I don't know if we're going to do that, but it's certainly the kind of thing we discuss. So even if we eventually decide not to do some of these things, you know, there's effort put into deciding what is the right thing for the players. And at the end of the day, like, we do need money to keep running the servers, right? We may have, you know, our parent company may be Tencent, but Tencent at no point gives us cash to run the game. It has to come from the players. We're a financially independent company here that happens to have had a shareholding change rather than, you know, us sitting there buying stuff out of their pocketbook, as it were. And so it does help if the stash tabs whose purpose is selling the convenience and prettiness of organization actually provides that. Now, we often think of stash tab ideas that we can't do because it is over the pay to win line, and those ones you never hear about. And I regret the fact that there was, I view it as significant miscommunication with the community about the new tabs. Like, looking back on it, I could see it coming. There were threads where players said, here is how we would organize the tabs. Here is how we would jam everything into the currency tab to make it all fit, ignoring the fact there's lots of leagues coming in the future, and the currency for those leagues is what we're reserving space for. And so they made those threads, and that's setting the expectation that the additional items they want to have in the stash tabs would be provided at no cost. And we did not step in and go, wait, we intend to sell that. We let the threads exist. And then later, the players data mined the fact that we'll be introducing new tabs. And we could have stepped in there and clarified and explained, or even announced beforehand so that it was done under our terms rather than upon being data mined. And we just let it be and let the thread sit there. And knowing that players were unhappy about this, we still went ahead with the announcement. Now, we were going to go ahead and continue to sell them, like the intention was not to change that, but we still handled we miscommunicated by just ignoring the fact that we should have a dialogue with the players before we actually put them up for sale. And so I see that as kind of a failing in the decision process of the communication on our part. The actual product we're selling, I think, is something that belongs in the game, and I understand there's concerns about that. And people are often quoting what I said at ExileCon about not introducing a second currency tab, and I firmly believe that for actual crafting items. We have lots of plans for stuff that's going to go in there in the future, and our intention was not to jam the oils in there as well, because realistically, they may say currency item on them like anything that stacks does, but they really aren't currency items as far as we're concerned. They're used for anointing, and that's a different thing.
On that quickly, how difficult would it be to relabel some of that stuff? Because that would be a huge quality of life for people with special tabs or normal tabs. If I could actually just search like fragment and that would bring up all the fragments, it'd make it much easier to sort through my inventory. Because currently when I'm clearing out a quad tab I'll do like maps, move all the maps, I'll then search currency, but it's highlighting the currency, it's highlighting the frags, it's highlighting all these different systems, scarabs, and then that in itself makes it much harder to just quickly move everything over.
It's interesting because what you're essentially suggesting is that we take away the word currency item on something that's technically a currency item but isn't really like a crafting item. I mean, it's possible, right? Like, it's possible that we take oils and just call them oils and make a new frame for them and that kind of thing to reduce this problem. I wonder if there's a better way we can do it. So at the moment, the way that the filtering that you're talking about works is that it if you Control-C an item, you get in the clipboard a pile of text of what the textual representation of the item is. That's what it's searching on, and that contains the word currency. So if we wanted the non-crafting items to not say currency, we'd have to take it away from there. I'll talk to the team about options. There might be other ways of doing this, like putting a thing you can put in there like pure currency or something, and then if you know the magic word, you can search for only pure currency or
because
some solution like that.
Obviously, if I want to sort scarabs, I can search scarab, but just having like more keywords, so to speak, a bit more diverse. Yeah, then it's just it helps everyone.
It's having scarab and oil and stuff be uniform. The problem is, like, if the word occurs in part of the flavor text on an item, it still shows up. Like, it might be better to have like item class : oil, which will only show oils because it's got that in there. I'll talk to the guys. I'm a little bit reticent to add such specific features because it's one of the things where you'll hear about it because I'll tell you, and anyone who reads the patch notes will get that one, and a couple of guys who make item filters, and then none of the rest of the community. And it's kind of secret knowledge, and 25 people benefit without really solving the problem at its core. But, it's pretty harmless to add that feature.
Because we can't I think the thing which always gets me is you can't search for stuff like boots. That screws me over on a fundamental level. Like, you should be able to search boots and it highlights all the boots and glove. Like, I remember when I used to do Chaos Recipe way back in the day, being able to just search for little things like that would make things feel so much better.
Is it really not going to do that?
Well, no, because it will just highlight like iron scale boots, but
there's some kind of boots that are called shoes.
Same for helmets,
sort of thing.
Or like
it's the
greaves
same for helmets,
and
for
stuff
everything,
like that.
basically.
Don't mind me. Okay, I'll look at
There's some really interesting workarounds actually. Like, everything that you can put in a map device has the text that you can put it in your personal map device. So I just search for fragments and stuff with the word personal, which is weird, but it works.
I use device.
Yeah, can someone summarize this in an email with all the things that they need and send it to chris@grindinggear.com for this specific issue, please? And I will see what I can do about making that better. Please, otherwise, post suggestions in the bug reports and suggestions forums, not to my email, thanks. But this one I will.
Nice.
Thank you. One question, since we did kind of talk about it a little bit, and this is, you don't have to go into it if you don't want to. You said before that there was some tabs you decided that crossed the line. Could you give an example? It could be purely hypothetical of the stash which in your mind would cross the line on this is now pay to win or pay to convenience too far.
Do you feel it crosses the line to have a Chaos Recipe stash tab that lets you actually vendor the items from the stash tab? We're at 50-50 on this one.
How
so you
much
put the items
storage
in,
does it have?
And you can push a button to Chaos Recipe them. Chat says that crosses the line.
But how much storage does it have?
I think
would be
that's
the thing.
closer. I think that's closer to Essence tab functionality than a lot of people give it credit for.
It saves you having to run to the vendor, which the Essence tab does. But a lot of people are doing Chaos Recipes, and they're often a matter of convenience. So this is saying that your process of generating currency is more convenient once you've paid whatever dollars. which might be a problem.
Yeah, because it renders like directly into the tradable currency of chaos rather than into another essence that you'd still then have to trade.
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
I see that.
Upgrading your essences is not really furthering your goals an awful lot in Path of Exile. Like, it's nice, but you could do it at any time, whereas this is giving you the stuff you need to trade. Yeah. Anyway, it's a difficult one because we've had a lot of requests for Chaos Recipe tabs, and the simplest way to do it is just a thing that organizes your items, but you've still got to take them all out into your inventory and then go and vendor them, which is only marginally more convenient than a quad tab, to be honest, right? It's basically a quad tab that puts your items in neat little lines. And honestly, for that, like, I'm undermining myself by saying things on streams that then get quoted at me at the top of Reddit, but an option there is just to make it so that quad tabs have a behavior where it does that, right? Like, you tick the box, another quad tab takes your Chaos Recipe items, and it's just free for people who have quad tabs, right? The question is, should I have a button that lets you vendor them? Because that does save you time of having to run to the vendor. And then there's the gray area, and we don't like stepping into gray areas if it actually undermines the the sanctity of the game itself.
Personally, I think that runs into a few issues. So I was saying, like, how much storage would I have? Because it feels like that just becomes a situation where, especially when you're picking up less loot, or if you're picking up the amount of loot there is now, you just have a quads tab, you dump everything into it, and you just never sort it. You accept that you're losing out on currency, but it's more efficient to just constantly spam it, and then you can constantly feed, Legion or whatever is on the map device at the time. And then also you have the issue where if you have, like, auto-sell features into a tab, you'll have people accidentally selling things, and then your customer support is help you accidentally, or I accidentally sold because of this tab that I bought with real money. And
yep, that's a very valid point.
Also, how much should the game revolve around kind of those kind of recipes, in terms of, like, how much is your currency generation? Do you want the game to being that specific action? I don't know if that's something that PoE needs. It's more like a resource you have if you want it. If anything, a middle way I could see would be if you make a good tag system for, like, say, boots. Make it so that they could go into maybe premium stats tabs. It's like boots will go in here if I shift click them, if that would ever be a function.
Yep.
And then you will have the 5 if you'll have your boot one, you'll have your helmet one, you'll have your body armor one, and you could take them out. But you always had, like, that could be a thing.
Our current feelings on tab affinities is not to allow you to specify, like, boots go in here, because then it takes away, like, it's too good that you leave a map and just control click everything into the stash and never think about it. We're willing to do it for the things we currently have tabs for I was going to say starting point, but I suspect that's where it's going to finish, because that does save you a lot of time. It does save having to flick between a good 6 or 7 of your tabs, like the maps go into the right place and so on. And so, yeah, look, I was initially pushing for this thing where boots and stuff auto-sort. Like, I made a lot of arguments to the team, but they were right. Like, it undermines the item weight stuff. And so compromising instead on half the items can go in the stash automatically, and the other ones you have to choose where they go is probably a good middle ground. But we'll find out when we're testing it. It's coming along, so we'll let you know. We're on we're on the player's side with this one.
With the system, would you be able to, just to clarify, for instance, assign tabs to something like that? So let's say I can assign all divination cards to go to a divination card tab that isn't a divination card tab from the shop?
That was a thing that I discussed earlier, where you can choose a premium stash tab or a regular stash tab to get your div cards, and we're uncertain about it. It makes it a lot more complicated, but it's something we have to discuss because it is a potential way that this could work to make it more fair on players. And so I don't know where we're going to be with that. It could be that we do it the simple way without that to start with, and we add it later, or maybe we never add it, or maybe it's at the beginning. We'll see how it goes. And a lot of it depends on implementation, because all of these are free features for people that have already bought the tabs. We'd rather get it out than sit there perfecting it forever and never actually release it and never get the players to actually be using it.
Since it got brought up, gone.
Oh, just because of the free feature thing? Would you worry that there would be a lot of backlash with you basically, what's the word for it? Making the old stash tabs useless by adding some of these features, like for people who have purchased quad and premiums?
It doesn't technically reduce the functionality of those tabs. It just makes other options, which are often a lot less expensive, better. But look, there's many arguments here, right? Like, it's hard. As soon as there's money involved, it's hard to make everyone happy, because some people have bought item A, some people have bought thing B, some people bought neither, some people bought both, right? It's really difficult, and we're just going to try to do the best that we can. We'll try to make choices that we feel are best for as many players as possible and sit well with us ethically.
Finally, on this point, because I don't want to labor on it for too long, since Raiz did bring it up again, how would you respond? Because this is the main argument I've been seeing a lot since the tab alignment system. I think will be really good and will feel much better as a player. That in a way it kind of forces people's hands to buy these new tabs, especially if we cannot, like, if we have a premium tabs already. If I can't assign that to be a Metamorph tab, for example, that's effectively kind of saying, well, if you really want the system, you have to buy the new League tabs and any future League tabs that are then designed. How do you feel about that argument?
That's an important thing to consider. I mean, like, on one hand, we put the money to good use as much as we can, right? Like, we're going to make more Path of Exile for as long as we can, and we've got to pay for Path of Exile 2, and it's expensive, and, it's going to be money that's well spent. On the other, we want Path of Exile to be a free game, and ideally people who just don't spend any money can still get as much of the free experience as possible, right? I mean, practically speaking, pretty much everyone in chat has probably spent some money on stash tabs, and we appreciate that. But having it feel more and more necessary is not necessarily a positive thing for the game. And so, I agree that we have to be careful with this.
Go on, Nuggy, you gonna...
So, okay, so with adding more and more stuff into the game and more stash tabs, would it maybe be time to think about sort of what are the required tabs, and with tab bloat, maybe make bundles for, like, maybe revisit how you sell the product. So when you have, say, 10 leagues of things, okay, we can sell them, but maybe when we get to 20, maybe we need to bundle some of the old content tabs and sell them to newer players, so they don't feel like they have to buy 20 tabs, but they buy the starting thing plus the new ones that are coming. Because the old players will already have bought them, and they're continuously benefiting from the game improvements. But newer players might feel it too cumbersome to have to buy 20 tabs rather than the 10.
I mean, like the, what's it called, the blood bundle that you have? Like that, basically, what Niggy's saying.
Yeah.
Because I've looked at it recently, and it's fairly outdated.
Our concern with bundling like this is, if we say, look, guys, here's a whole bunch of tabs you can buy them at a big discount, and we make it available, the existing players that bought them at full price are going to be like, what? I've been here for like 5 years. I've paid you money when you needed it the most, and now you're making it cheap for the new players. We have to be really careful about people that have already put money in.
Inflation.
But you've already done that with the premium tabs and other tabs of that nature. Because I remember buying tons of tabs for currencies, for maps, for everything. And that's basically, and I'm okay with that as an old player. I'm okay with that. I would like to see some more functionality, but whenever you add new good tabs, I'll gladly buy them.
Well, chat's saying they don't care about this one, so sure, I guess we'll be making a bundle then. But our plan is not to introduce too many tabs in the future. Like, it was bad planning to put 3 League tabs in at once, right? Like, we thought that with the precedent of Delve and Essence in the past, there wouldn't be a particularly large amount of drama over it. But we should have done it, closer to those leagues being released. And you'll notice in Harvest, for example, that the storage is just something you can put in your hideout. It's not like hey, here's a Harvest tab, That could have been a tab, but, we decided to make sure that, because we want to encourage people to hold on to seeds, and it would quickly fill their stash. Otherwise, we, made sure there was storage built into the league for that one.
Has there been any discussion on revamping the starting tabs to any degree? Either adding like an additional tab as part of your starting stash, or changing one of them to be a more limited version of a currency tab or something along those lines?
It is discussed from time to time, but hasn't currently resulted in any action there. And this is partly because, it's every moment at work at the moment, and most of this year has been solving fires. And honestly, like Friday, for example, right? Noon, and it's time to talk about Bloom with 8 team members and write a complicated post and proofread it and translate it. And that's half a day justifying something, which is important. Communication is important, but that's time away from, and we only get 60 days in the cycle to make a league, right? So that's 1% of that gone on writing that post for a lot of the senior team members that have to all make sure it's explained precisely and has every reason in there. And this type of thing and various other disasters we have to solve internally means that there isn't a lot of time to go and sort out kind of fundamental things like what you're saying. And we need to make time for that, right? Like, our studio priorities are our problem, I guess, but we do need to actually have time to sort out some of the fundamental stuff and make sure it's got the attention it deserves. It's just really difficult when we're running constantly to keep up, which it feels like we have been in 2020. It's a difficult year. I mean, I know a lot of people have it a lot more difficult than we do, but it has been hard for us.
I don't want to take up too much of your time, so use that to segue into the final point, the one non-item topic on our item podcast. How are you going to live up to the expectations of Path of Exile 2? Because it seems that whenever anything happens with PoE, people are like, oh, it's fine, they'll fix it all in PoE 2. PoE 2 is going to change everything, How do you handle that pressure? Because people have some... It seems great from what we've seen, but people have some very lofty ambitions and goals with that.
Path of Exile 2 does solve those problems. And I think this might be an issue. Path of Exile 2, in its current trajectory, is going to be amazing. But that level of quality is making it take a while. And we showed you Act 1 last year. Act 1 took a year to make, right? Our intention is to speed up because we want to get it out soon. So we've been working on Act 2 and are currently working on Act 3 as well. And honestly, at the current speed, Act 2 is going to take a year to make. And we need to be faster. So Act 3 is coming along a bit faster. There's better planning. There's more people on it. But the lockdown and the inability to hire foreigners because of the border situation and the leagues taking up a lot of our time, they're slowing it down. And so the quality of Path of Exile 2 means it's going to be a while. And we don't want it to be a while. Like Path of Exile's good and getting expansions. And a lot of my focus is on Path of Exile 1 while a lot of the team work on Path of Exile 2. But it's a big project, and it is going to solve a lot of the things you're talking about. Like, it is going to meet those expectations. And this means it's going to take a while. Now, there's questions like, should we do it faster and compromise on certain areas? Maybe don't change all of the systems. Maybe keep certain things similar. Maybe be more hasty with development of some of the content to get it out earlier. And those are difficult questions we face every day because the team want to make it the best possible action RPG they can. Now, this means we're getting a Blizzard level of polish, but it also means we're getting a Blizzard level of time frame for it. And I kind of want to deliver it sooner. And so, yeah, when you say to me, it's going to solve everyone's problems, and everyone's got high expectations for it, I wonder if that's a negative thing, because it's currently going to be the best action RPG ever, and that's going to make it take a while. And so that's what's on my mind with that stuff. Now, the good news is we are getting faster at developing it, right? Like, our year per act is getting shorter, and we're going to get it down to 3 months per act because things are working in parallel. There's a lot more happening. It's going to be fine. But it's a bit of an interesting question for us because honestly, at ExileCon last year, we gave the impression that we'd be entering beta, at least for some of the content, like soon, right? And we're not. It's going to be a while. And I want to release this before Diablo 4, for pride reasons, at least, if not financial one. But yeah, it's coming along, and I really can't wait to show you guys some of the stuff because there's a lot of awesome stuff we made in the last year. And
nice.
Yeah, if players think that's going to be the best thing ever, I feel they're kind of right. I really like this project. I'm just sorry it's taking a while, but we'll just keep doing good leagues. And 3.12 is a good one, actually. It's one of my favorite. The 3.12 league is the league that has had the highest level of excitement from people hearing what it is internally. We pitch it to people, and they say, I don't know if I can swear on the stream, but they swear, and it's good. Yeah. There's a lot of excitement for 3.12, so I'm very much looking forward to that one. And yeah, we kind of have the intentional plan of making good leagues for the next year or two, right? Because we could just make watered down crappy leagues, like just small ones, and put a lot of effort into making Path of Exile 2 come out 6 months earlier. But I really don't want to let things go lax. Like, I want Path of Exile to continue to grow with the base game, and then Path of Exile 2 is a nice surprise when it happens, as opposed to, let's let this die and hope that one reinvigorates it later.
That was a very satisfying answer. One question quickly on that point, and I'm curious on your point of view, because we all played the beta for 3.0 when that came out. What's your worry there with players maybe getting into the beta too early, killing hype? Obviously, you want people to test it. Like, what time frame kind of stuff would you want to go with that? Would you not want to do beta until everything's ready, or would you want to do it earlier or later? Or...
That's a great question. And when we were actually discussing last week, it's tricky because the usual plan that we do is okay. So traditionally, games were sold in boxes and you pay $60 for a game. And that worked well as a model. people had to pay money to get in. If you do that, though, you fail to capture what's called the price discrimination money. You fail to capture the demand curve for people that want to pay less, as in they can't afford $60, so they can't pay you anything. And you fail to capture the people that want to pay more because they really love the product and want to spend a lot of money. And so that's where free-to-play comes in, because with free-to-play games, if you can only afford $5, you spend $5 and the company gets $5. And if you can afford to spend $1,000 and providing the company has enough offerings, the company gets $1,000. So free-to-play works well because you capture the entire demand curve. The problem is, of course, that it can be slow to capture the money from the users, and you lose the effect that many games capitalize on, especially like survival genre games, where there's the game of the day that all your friends want to play, but you have to pay $60 to get in, even though you're not getting $60 of enjoyment out of it. And so you fail that upfront thing. Like the release of Walson, for example, that was a retail game at a high price. A lot of people bought that. They made a lot of money on launch day. If it was a free-to-play game, I don't know if they would have made that money, right? Because it requires a long schedule of microtransactions and constant updates and all that kind of stuff. So in that case, like a boxed copy price was probably the right choice for them. So with our betas for 2.0 and 3.0 and even the core game, what we have done in the past is we've made the beta accessible with the purchase of a supporter pack. And this is an intentional thing that I've never spoken about from a business point of view, because it's business and that's not something we want to explain how it's made, as it were. But the thing is that with that model, a person has to pay money to get in. And then you also have the advantages of being free to play later. You kind of get the best of both worlds. Now, we of course have thresholds where anyone that's bought a sufficient number of supporter packs in the past gets free access, and that's a very large amount of users. Like if we were to do another beta now, pretty much everyone in chat just randomly will get in because they've bought enough supporter packs. Like I don't know what the threshold is. It's like $500, and a lot of people have supported the game there, or they can spend like $30 or $20 or whatever it is to get the supporter pack to get in. So it's not particularly difficult. But our intention was that we would treat the Path of Exile 2 beta thing the same way, where it's an opportunity to sell supporter packs and it becomes free to play a little while later. Of course, the difficulty is you kind of kill the hype of the release if everyone's playing Path of Exile 2, especially on a server that's going to be deleted. That's what happened with the Fall of Oriath beta, where people are playing on a server, and honestly, if it's in beta where there's going to be a wipe, they don't care about their characters. There's no persistence. There's no standard this stuff is going to. It's kind of terrible, terrible retention metrics. And so our solution with that was to have a good league that came out alongside the actual release. So the release introduced, I think it was Harbinger, for example, and some, finished off the game, as it were. And so it may be that for Path of Exile 2, we just have a really compelling league instead of content that comes out with the actual launch of the game. Alternatively, we may be able to beta test for actual testing purposes with a much smaller audience, right? Maybe if we say you can't buy your way in, here's a group of 400 people, and we just get some testing done, and then it becomes free to play on launch day. So this is difficult for us because we do need the money from the sale of the supporter packs, but it's entirely a business optimization question at that point. It's entirely a question of what is best for the game, the community, the company, and so on. It's less critical that we sell the supporter packs for that beta in order to fund the continued development of it, because we're not so timing sensitive when that money comes. We still need the revenue, but waiting for the free-to-play revenue over time is potentially acceptable. So to cut a long story short, we have a lot of options for the beta, and we don't know what we're going to be doing there, but we're very, very aware of all of these issues. And I don't want to really burn the players out on the content with a non-formal launch as much as I have done in the past. There are other options, like limiting the beta testing to just like Acts 1 and 2, for example, where you get something small to play, which certainly just is a little bit of a taste of the game. We could do that soon if we needed to, but then that's really far away from the actual release of it. So I don't know. You tell me, what do you guys want?
It's risky because if you don't have the proper testing on the later content, it ends up potentially having a lot of issues. But at the same time, I feel like there's so much lost in having a big beta for something like this.
There's also something to be said about having the experience of going through an entire campaign to start to finish, especially since it seems, for everything we've heard, that PV2 is much more story-oriented. Like we're telling a compelling narrative. So having that in piecemeal, I think it depends, because it's kind of like, are you asking from a tester's point of view what is best? Obviously, from the tester's point of view, get it to people who will test and have a history of it as soon as possible. But for the average consumer point of view, And this is also awkward because it's kind of, we've all played the game for long enough that we'd probably be part of the testing people, so we're talking for people in chat like, shut up, Tarke, we want to play
give
as
it
well.
to just me.
Yeah.
I'll take care of it.
Yeah.
So there is an interesting point, by the way, that doesn't apply for PoE 2. That was a really big reason why we wanted to run the beta for both 2.0 and 3.0. So consider where things are with regard to introducing acts 5 through 10 or introducing act 4. If you do it in the live game with no beta, so you literally say to people, here's the new act, go have fun. They're going to jump on their standard character and they're going to go and run through the act, and they can kill the monsters in one hit and just play through it in literally, how long does it take to run through act 4? 20 minutes, 5 minutes? It's fast, right? And the same thing for acts 5 through 10. And what we did not want was, especially on stream, people's first impression of watching it, because the first person to play acts 5 through 10 was going to be someone in standard, and they were going to blaze through it, and it was going to look terrible, and the boss fights would be over in seconds, and it would have just been a complete mess. And so by having the beta server explicitly requiring you to start new characters, then the experience of the people who got to that content first, who were streaming it, were people that were struggling because they had raced there and they were unfamiliar with it and they had low-level characters compared to it, and it made a compelling viewing experience. And a lot of people's first experience with the content was played properly on underpowered characters with a sense of discovery and so on. For Path of Exile 2, this is less important because you cannot play that campaign with an existing character. You must start at the beginning with one of the characters that's 20 years later, with the new character classes and so on. Anyway, so that's a side thing, why the betas were basically mandatory beforehand, and just a question of finessing community expectations, testing, and money at this stage.
Could you have an existing character run through the normal content again? Because I'm assuming there's going to be other stuff at the end of PO2 other than just the acts, like for the actual end game. So you would kind of wouldn't you have some of the same issues with just people using existing characters to get to the end game part?
Yes, you may do. Now, our current plan, so I'm talking completely honestly here, not in a marketing voice, just random thoughts about what we're doing at work at the moment. This changes literally daily, but the current way that we're looking is that, as you know, it's got a shared endgame with Path of Exile, right? And while the endgame is not going to be the same as it is now, it's not going to be the same as it is now after 3.13, I suspect, but while it's not going to be the same as it is now, the intention is probably that the end game of Path of Exile 2 is the same as the end game of whatever league we've released just before it, if you see what I mean. There's some new end game. We released that as a league, that an expansion that gets it out of the way. It's in there, it's tested, we know it works. Path of Exile 2 comes out and introduces the new storyline content and all the new systems, whatever we do with whatever crazy stuff we do with the passive tree, whatever we're doing with all the other systems in the game. What's Pantheon like now? There's a lot of stuff there, right? So it's less important that we change the mapping experience at that release day, because that's a good thing to focus on for the next expansion afterwards or beforehand, or both potentially. And so you can think of, it's like what happened with 3.0, right? 3.1 was War for the Atlas. The big endgame revamp came one league after the release of 3.0, and 3.0 still had exceptionally good retention because it took people quite a long time to play through all of that content. It was just one league later that we released the map that went with it. So we're considering, in an attempt to get Path of Exile 2 out earlier, to time the release of its endgame component to either be beforehand or afterwards, rather than on the day. Because if we try to make it the best thing in every possible respect on release day, it's going to be more content that's not tested well, more content that's slow to develop, and so on and so on. So anyway, that's just our thinking internally. It may be that we have a lot of endgame stuff that's novel on release day, but that's what we're thinking at the moment.
This is a completely out there, just weird marketing suggestion. Since you kind of want the idea of you're still selling some kind of supporter packs to help fund PoE2 development, so it's not all backloaded for however many years down the line it is. Yeah. Since you're working on an act by act basis, could you maybe make art books for each act? And then it's kind of you sell a supporter pack with some art books, and you've done that before, and that was really cool with 3.0. We got this art book of everything from Orioth. I would buy a supporter pack which gave loads of cool art for Act 1, which funds Act 2 development, and then I buy Act 2 stuff for Act 3, and so on and so forth. And that way you kind of get to sell sneak peeks to future stuff without actually ruining everything of you've played Act 1 in a vacuum or something.
Yeah, we could. It appeals to some players a lot, and some players don't care, I suspect. But I like the idea of tying in packs. I honestly feel we could put more work into interesting supporter packs, to be honest. Like, you know, it's one of those things that we've kind of got a bit of a formula for it at the moment. And while that's good value for the players in terms of the micros they get and the merchandise and so on, we certainly could mix it up with more interesting stuff, I suspect.
I don't know.
Especially for Path of Exile too.
I just, because I'm surrounded like loads of little maps and this, that, and the other. It just kind of seems like we've got so much of this stuff. I think that could maybe be a cool way of getting that to people, and because it would still be hype. Like it would still be really hype getting to see some of the like progression, because I feel like that's also one of the kind of issues that we have often is it can feel like if you're on Reddit or you're a YouTuber or you're anyone that you're shouting into a well and you're like, just give me the info, and we get the info after the fact. It's kind of like the whole stash tab thing. We heard about stash tab alignments after the fact, and if we're talking like 2-3 years down the line for PoE2, at some point we're gonna have to see something, because otherwise you're gonna I remember how toxic Reddit was like right before 3.0, and everyone's like, the campaign's awful, I hate this, and you're like, oh, by the way, we're like changing everything. So I don't know, but
that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
In fact, those announcements of big things are the best things about being a game developer, by the way. Like watching people's reactions to the... I'm so glad there were no leaks for the 3.0 stuff. Like people's reactions to that trailer. It was good. Have any of you guys received the... Sorry, have any of you guys received the game book from the most recent supporter packs? You know, the Lord's Labyrinth one?
Waiting for it to arrive.
No, I want it. Give it to me.
I got my copy this week. I'm very pleased.
I want to play it.
The game book.
Yeah, it was,
the Lord's Labyrinth.
It was if you bought up to the Judicator supporter pack, I think. So it's still waiting on my one in the post.
I have that. I got that just earlier.
It is not a skimpy thing. It's like that thick.
Yeah. You know, this was written by Chris Kluwe, like the professional athlete, was one of the authors of this book. Like a community member who loved Path of Exile and had a very successful career as a footballer. I'm not sure. I'm showing my ignorance here, but yeah, he wrote a book.
Wow.
He's the same guy who wrote the like short stories for each class way back when on the forums, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah,
he's a nice guy.
Good. It was really good.
Yeah, I mean, it had impact, influence from some of our other writing staff as well. Like, you know, there was, I think, Edwin, one of the game's traditional writers, was involved, and a lot of people proofread it and so on. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun, that one.
Well, I don't want to keep you on for too long. We've already had you for over 2 hours. Unless there's anything else you'd like to spoil or announce, we'd happily hear more.
I'm going to hear all about this when I look at my email and see the complaints that team members have for various bits and pieces that I've either spoiled correctly or incorrectly. So the important part is I managed to get through this without saying the name of the Lex League. So that's great.
What didn't you say?
Exactly. It's unfortunately one of those names where the single word just tells you how the entire league works in one go. So yeah.
Uh-oh. Which single word?
Well, in that case, Chris, I'd like to thank you for coming on, and hopefully we can have more of these kind of mid-league designing discussions in the future.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the questions, and thanks for chat for being awesome as well. All 6,000 of you guys.
You're giving them a bit much credit, but they did all right.
They were okay.
That's what I was looking to the side for all the time. They're like, why is Chris looking to the side? It's to read the chat, and they were happy. And that was good.
Well, in that case, I hope you have a nice evening, and I'll catch you later.
All right, take care, guys. Thanks so much.
See you later, Chris.
Yeah. Thanks.
See ya.